Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And sorry we are a minute or two delayed before we start our OPP presentation, but I would like to begin with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the lands which constitute the present-day region of Peel is part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Widnot Nations. We recognize these people and their ancestors as people who inhabited these lands since time immemorial. The region of Peel is home to many global Indigenous peoples as well. We also want you to know we are streaming the public portion of this meeting live on our YouTube channel. If we happen to experience any technical difficulties with the live stream, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will also be posted on YouTube. So with that, welcome all. I want to start with roll call. All members are present. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest with regards to the OPP agenda for today? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes. Al, if you would move those, seconded by Mayor Crombie. Is there anybody opposed? That carries. There is one recommendation that the minutes be approved as noted, and I've got that. Under the new business, item 2, OPP 2023 second quarter operational statistics analysis report. The 2023 second quarter operations summary and statistical analysis report with respect to policing the town of Caledon as provided to the board by Inspector Kearns, OPP Caledon Detachment Commander. The report provides statistics and analysis for April to June for the areas noted. So with that, over to Inspector Kearns. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having myself and one of my staff sergeants, Kathy Kiomos, with me today. I just want to highlight some of the statistics here. We'll start out with our public complaints. We currently have 2 ongoing investigations in regard to conduct of our officers. No further comments I can add on that. We're going to touch base on the fact that Caledon has seen an increase in fatal collisions over this past quarter. 5 recorded fatal collisions recorded in the months of April to June 2023, compared to 1 in the same time period last year. One of the fatal collisions recorded in this 5 is actually a driver who suffered a medical event prior to the collision happening. 2 of the 5 is alcohol or speed related, and the 2 of these 5 are believed to be driver error related. Caledon continues to aim to reduce the number of deaths on our roadways daily. Our detachment goal remains in line with that of Peel Region's Vision Zero. No loss of life is acceptable due to motor vehicle collision. It is, however, no secret that the resident base in Caledon continues to grow rapidly. With this growth comes an increase in the amount of vehicles on our roadways. Caledon OPP continues to look for ways to improve our community's road safety when and wherever we can. The OPP has conducted 3 separate road safety traffic campaigns over that second quarter time frame, targeting the most common casual traffic effects, including the OPP Easter Long Weekend traffic campaign. Caledon led the OPP with the highest number of tickets issued in the province. Canada Road Safety Week, Caledon came only second to 1 other detachment in the entire province. And Canada Day Week campaign, Caledon led the OPP with the highest number of tickets issued in the province. On top of the provincial campaigns, Caledon OPP has conducted additional traffic blitz to target some of our major traffic arteries. In June, we ran 2 separate traffic blitzes, one on Highway 10 in partnership with the MTO, and one on Mayfield in partnership with MTO and the Peel Regional Police. The second quarter accurately reflects the increased enforcement being done on Caledon roadways. As year to date, there has been a 9.2 increase in Highway Traffic Act charges laid and a 10.7% increase in Criminal Code driving charges laid. As our community grows, we will continue to look for ways to make Caledon roadways a safe place for everyone to travel on. I'd like to comment now on violent crime. During the second quarter of 2023, there was a noted slight increase in benchmark crime in Caledon of approximately 6% over the same period in 22 and less than 1% to date. Sexual assaults during this period showed a marked increase over the second quarter of 2022. Despite this increase, all but one of these incidents have been cleared. 9 incidents were reported, with 5 of those cleared by charge, 3 cleared through youth diversion, and 1 investigation remains open. We continue to see overdose-related deaths increasing in Caledon and across the province due to the proliferation of potent, inexpensive synthetic opioids, namely fentanyl. During the second quarter, there was 1 overdose death related to that of a 44-year-old. As is common with these cases, the Caledon Major Crime Unit, in collaboration with the Caledon Community Street Crime Unit, investigated this matter, and to date, 1 person has been charged with criminal negligence causing death. Caledon had 4 robberies occur, which is unchanged from 22. 2 of these were cleared by charge, 1 investigation remains open, and 1 is unsolved. Our successful robbery investigations are attributed to collaboration with our street crime and bordering municipal partners, such as Peel, as often incidents of robbery, especially those related to pharmacies, are multi-jurisdictional, with many incidents occurring over a short time in varied areas. During the second quarter and year to date, there's been an increase in school-related criminal activity, including sexual offenses. The loss of the school resource position in the schools has lessened our abilities to take a proactive approach to combat criminal offending in youth and to build and maintain those positive relationships. Beyond the incidents reported during the second quarter, the Caledon Major Crime Unit continues to carry investigations and devote resources to many major cases, homicides, overdose deaths, attempt murders from the first quarter. We're going to touch now on property crimes, trafficking. We see an increase of 66% in trafficking offenses. Community Street Crime Unit has seen a large decrease in drug traffickers living in Caledon. However, our drug traffickers now come almost solely from Brampton and Toronto to traffic in the community. The traffickers do not reside primarily in Caledon's community. Most of the drug trafficking charges are in Brampton or Toronto court due to the locations of where search warrants are being conducted. These stats are not truly reflective due to the location of the charges laid, primarily Brampton. We've seen an increase in overdose occurrences during this period as fentanyl becomes more prevalent in our community. Caledon has not seen much production in the area of controlled substances in the past years. The increase of 1 was due to a cannabis extraction lab production site. Caledon leads 16%. More criminal offenses are occurring in Caledon, specifically property and violent crime. As a result, more charges are being laid. Again, this is due to our proximity to Toronto, Brampton, and our specific increase in population. Caledon leads Central Region in stolen vehicles, which comprises the majority of theft over occurrences. The listing shows a decrease of minus 9.55%. For stolen vehicles alone, there was 225 in 2022 in Caledon. Thus far in 23, there's been 198 in Caledon. During April to June 2023, Caledon had 74 incidents. From July 1st to current, we have had 61 incidents, which is a slight decrease. Street crime has seen a decrease recently in auto crime. We've been involved in numerous large projects over the past few months, working with Toronto Police, Peel Regional Police, York, Halton, and CBSA targeting groups involved in high-end auto thefts in our communities. There has been numerous arrests, charges, and search warrants executed on these groups, which may be a factor in the decrease of these thefts. We've seen a 39% increase since 2022 this far in our break and enters. From April to June 2023, we've had 32 break and enters. The increase is likely related to several factors, such as an increase in population and number of residential homes in Caledon, as well as a general increase in property crime rates. Clearance rate, so property crime stats are very similar to last year, with approximately 15% clearance rate. Clearance rate for property crime would be a result of our location, and primarily the thieves that we are arresting come from areas south of our location. Of course, thieves have become smarter by wearing gloves and covering their faces, and have definitely made it more difficult in sort of dealing with video surveillance and or fingerprints. Drug crime year-to-date 2022 and 2023 is very similar, with approximately 80% clearance rate. Most drug occurrences are proactive in nature, and our street crime and major crime are becoming much better at investigating and solving overdose incidents, including a recent overdose death in Caledon. We'll touch base on some other news. Happy to announce that Caledon is welcoming 8 new recruits at the end of the month. They come from diverse backgrounds and will be a great addition to our team, as well as we will also welcome in November 3 new experienced officers from other police agencies to our team in Caledon. The pilot project for the detachment operations clerk is doing well and provides much support for our officers in their daily work. And finally, 2 new special constables will be arriving in October to support our court operations. Just wanted to make mention that this weekend, thousands of officers, family, friends, and community members will arrive in Ottawa to celebrate Memorial Weekend. I want to pay tribute to our brothers and sisters who sacrifice their lives in service to our communities, province, and country, and also honor the ongoing sacrifices by those they love the most. Thank you very much.
Inspector Kearns, thank you. Are there any questions at this time? Member Boughton, please.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Commander. Nice to see you. A couple of things. With the new officers that you're bringing on, how close are you to your number? I mean, the last couple of years you've been way down. Where will you be with the new recruits that you're bringing on?
Well, I can say the challenge always with Caledon for the officers in Caledon is the cost of living in Caledon. So as officers come in, we also have officers going out. So I say we're staying at a status quo, but I'm hoping by the end of this year to see an increase in numbers at our detachment, which of course will be great benefit. In the meantime, we're very well supported by our neighboring detachments. And so the service level, as always, is very high in Caledon.
Okay, thank you. And one more, Chair, through you. We've had a significant increase in stunt driving, in particular in the area that I live, and I just want to make a personal comment that I did talk to Commander Kearns and then officers who were dispatched. Their level of professionalism and watching to see that there's a lot more activity in the area is fantastic. You've got a great team. The 2 officers that I met with were great, and so thank you for everything you do. This is a great report. I think the best that we've ever had in 5 years, and keep up the good work. You're a terrific leader.
Thank you so much. And like I said, I owe it all to the members that work with me. They make me look good, thankfully. And I do appreciate all the work. For all of you today, thank you for your time, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. One more question, though, Mayor Crombie.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Chair, does the RTS request to speak work? It does work. Okay, we'll do that in the future. I was going to say the same thing. I think that's the most comprehensive report we've ever had, so thank you. The stunt driving isn't isolated to Caledon. Obviously, we see it in our cities as well. I also noted that your car theft rates are going down. Was that not anecdotal, but was that truly reflective of what's going on? Or do you think there is some sort of plateau that's been reached, or was it just good luck? Yeah.
Well, I can say that, and I can speak for some of my partners here today, Peel Regional Police, OPP, Halton, York, Toronto. There was a targeted project that focused on some of these players involved in that with great success, and that continues. As we know, watching the news, there's an increase in carjacking as well now, and I know that we and our partners are working together to combat that, and as well as making sure that not only the public remains safe, but are our officers involved in these occurrences.
Thank
So
you.
we
And-
will continue to work hard towards that.
And we'll acknowledge the great work our team has done at the appropriate time because we're very proud of them. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all my questions. I have a receipt of the information moved by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Member Boughton. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And I now adjourn that meeting accordingly. Thank you all. Okay, that takes us right into our Peel Police Services Board meeting of Friday, September 22nd. We've had our Indigenous land acknowledgement roll call. All members are present. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Hearing none, over to the Chief's update. Chief.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, 3 of the deputies have some verbal updates, but I just want to acknowledge on the heels of Inspector Kern's comments, this weekend is a National Police Memorial, and we are honoring 10 names to the wall in Ottawa. There is, with the partnership of the PRPA and the police service, we do have representatives that are running, riding, and attending to march. So that is this weekend. I do also want to acknowledge that, while business and operations continue, we've had some really remarkable footprint of our officers nationally contributing to dialogue on policing. One of which I know Inspector Ishmael was in Ottawa yesterday for an anti-Muslim hate crimes symposium and contributed to that, which again is a representation of the work that's happening here in Peel. Prince Edward Island, we had members from the team also presenting there on the training and the caliber of work that's happening within Peel. And then most recently in Edmonton this week, the Edmonton Police Service and the board hosted the first inaugural Safety of Our Cities conference, the intention of which is to bring police agencies, private sector, not-for-profits that are pressing into spaces that are non-traditional into one conference. And we did have Deputy DePat and some of his team speaking on the work that's been happening here at Peel. I just mentioned that to you because we are in Peel hoping to host next year's conference. It has international attendees, and just again, the role of us is to was it the rising tide floats all boats. We're hoping to do that, and we also learn from others too. But with that, I'm going to hand it over perhaps to Deputy Milinovich to speak to the auto theft discussion.
Thank you, Chief. And through the chair, I am incredibly happy to announce that we are going to be hosting the second annual Auto Theft Summit here in Peel. That's going to occur March 20th, 2024. And the reason why I would like to highlight that, obviously we had the inaugural one earlier this year, and I think it's important to highlight because what that did for us was it really provided us a platform and created some momentum. As a police service, we are really committed to continuing to drive the work against auto theft. From that summit, we had a number of recommendations that came out, and that's how I would like to organize the updates that I'm going to provide. The first recommendation that came out of the Auto Summit was the need to enhance enforcement through provincial and multi-jurisdictional joint forces operations. We've just heard a great example of that from our OPP partners, and in a second I'm going to pass it over to Deputy Andrews to talk about some of that. But I would also like to share with the board and the community that one of the things that we've done as an organization is doubled our auto theft team. So that team is currently fully operational as of September. And, you know, I've said this before, I'll say it again. While we may not be the panacea or the answer to all of the issues in auto theft, we are going to arrest and charge more people for organized auto theft. That's a commitment we have to our community. And maybe I'll just pass it over to Deputy Andrews for an update on the project that they just completed.
Thank you, Nick. Through the chair, I'd just like to take the opportunity to update the board on a high-level, high-impact, enhanced enforcement project that was conducted out of the divisional front line over the past year. Project Vinny commenced in September of last year, where investigators discovered that vehicles that were being stolen in the region were being re-VINed, fraudulently re-registered, and then sold to unsuspecting customers across the GTA. Working with MTO, TPS, our partners in the OPP, we were able to identify and arrest 6 individuals, lay 42 charges, and recover 22 vehicles worth approximately $2 million. that is just one example of the number of projects that are being run, high impact, in line with our enhanced enforcement pillar of the recommendations coming out of the summit in March.
Thank you for that, Mark. Next, I'd like to provide the board with an update in relation to establishing multi-sectoral working groups. We've often talked about the need to engage in industry partners in addressing this issue. It's not an enforcement issue alone. I'm happy to report that we continue to build those partnerships. The phone is now being answered. We are going so far as to having representatives from large manufacturers come and do inspections on vehicles, particularly when we're starting to see new trends in thefts. So that's really important for us so that they can begin to incorporate that into some of their own processes. And then finally, we committed to pushing public awareness. I think it would be difficult for anybody to argue that our community isn't aware of the issue of auto theft. We're including in that messaging prevention, but also sharing some of the details of what are resulting or what the issues are. Recently, we were contacted by CBC, who was looking to do an hour-long investigative piece on what those issues are. Myself and some of the experts from our team provided some insights to that and supported that. So that, along with all the corporate comms messaging that we're doing, really is getting that message out there. And I think people are very alive to the fact that this is an issue affecting our community. And then finally, I'm also happy to announce we're going to be hosting the International Auto Theft Investigators Symposium in May. So those are two big events that, once again, we are going to leverage and capitalize on to promote our message, but continue to lead the work in this area. And lastly, I'll leave you with, we have had or been invited to the ports in Montreal. So myself and a number of my team are going to be traveling to the ports there for some meetings and conversations with our policing partners in Montreal, but also CBSA. So by no stretch of the imagination, a comprehensive overview of the work going on, just some highlights, but I felt it was a good opportunity to remind the community that we hear them, we understand how it's affecting them, and I can say we're trying to do everything we can to address the issue.
Thank you. Questions? Mayor Crombie.
Thanks so much. So congratulations on all the success we've had, Project Vinny. And what was the value of that we?
Just slightly under $2 million. $2 million.
2 million. Why did I think there was a greater number? Okay. Well, there was the number. How many vehicles was that? 20.
22
22
vehicles.
vehicles. Congratulations. And how did we stumble on those vehicles? Were they being kept somewhere?
The discovery of the revinning project
Mm-hmm.
led us to investigate the individuals that were doing the revinning, and we, through the investigative process, were able to locate where they were storing the vehicles.
It's excellent. It's great work. It's such a relief. So anecdotally, we hear that often officers, when we had this conversation this morning, when people observe that their cars are being stolen from driveways or they've watched it on their security cameras, that sometimes we aren't available to attend on site. Is that a staffing shortage, or is it just a priority triaging issue? Or because all of us elect officials, we hear from residents and we see the videos and they post them on their Facebook, and they don't understand why there often isn't an officer available to attend the scene.
You've unpacked a number of issues there, Mayor. Staffing, priority of calls, etc. We've been made aware of that customer service piece, which is a significant issue, and we've put in place a response where every auto theft is being directly connected to an officer that's attending the location and speaking to the victim. It's not just laying in priority because of the difficulty in dispatching resources. But we've put in place a program piloted in 22 Division, where every auto theft elicits a uniformed response.
So we used to hear of many break-in entries, and now we hear pretty much just auto thefts and rings of auto thefts. And frankly, some of the residents have tags in their cars and actually know where their vehicles are, but are encouraged or discouraged rather from, attending and trying to repossess their own property. Yeah.
Sorry, if I may, Chief, and through the chair, just to top up the discussion on the recovered value of vehicles from the project. I think you may be thinking of Project Big Rig,
Yes.
which was a project that was oriented towards commercial auto and logistics and trucks. And in that project, we recovered, I believe it was north of $10 million.
That's the one I'm thinking of. Okay.
Yeah. But the other thing I would like to highlight too, and just to provide perspective of the scope of the work that's being done, but the issue as well, so far in 2023, we have recovered $127 million worth of stolen vehicles and product. So tremendous amount, but it also provides you with some perspective when you imagine that our recovery rate is in around 50%. It gives you an idea of the value and the issue, not just here in Peel, but nationally.
Mm-hmm. And can one of you speak to the fact that vehicles that have the tags hidden in them, those individuals are discouraged from trying to reclaim their vehicles?
Yeah, the reason why we would discourage people from trying to reclaim them is it can be incredibly dangerous. I talked about some of the work being done to create momentum. I think that's a great example of it because we're starting to see that more often. You may be aware that some of the insurance companies are offering incentives for people to begin incorporating more covert tracking systems, aftermarket systems in their vehicles. It's been done in other provinces and really has been helpful in allowing us to recover them. So we are seeing that more often. Now, having said this, I would remind the community that these are organized groups of criminals that are coming to our region for the explicit purpose of shopping for vehicles. It can be dangerous. And, again, a vehicle, while understanding the impact of it, it's not worth injuring yourself or somebody else. So, as Deputy Andrews mentioned, we're alive to the increase of that happening through policing operations. We will do everything we can to get there and recover it. In fact, last night I took a phone call from somebody who had done that, had left their jurisdiction, and was actually at the Port of Montreal.
Wow.
And as luck would have it, one of our experts was there was doing a presentation for the Canadian Financing and Leasing Association. And through him and Montreal, they've started working on trying to recover that vehicle. So,
I mean, our residents feel very helpless in this, as you know, because they often have security cameras and protect themselves and hide their keys and their fobs, etc., and then watch their vehicles stolen on security camera. And we hear more about auto theft than we do about break and enters into homes. And, I've been encouraging my counselors to have town hall meetings with yourselves on how to better protect themselves and what else can be done. They're feeling pretty helpless. And I'm wondering also if you might want to address, do we track the statistics, or are we even aware of how many cars are stolen in a day, a month, a year?
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
Mayor, we do track those statistics, and I can obtain those for you. But I just want to top up on the and I don't want to fearmonger here, but when Deputy Milovich speaks about the sort of dangers associated to trying to recover your own vehicle, we've been able to identify and connect individuals that are heavily involved in organized vehicle theft, that are also involved in homicides. We actually had a shooting in the south end of Mississauga by the lakeshore early this year that was connected to an auto theft group that was involved in a shooting in Brampton the night before. So understanding the impact it has on the victims, we discourage individuals trying to reclaim their vehicles because they put themselves in danger with very organized and very violent criminals.
And I would maybe just complement that with, as Mark said, we do track the numbers of those vehicles through the summit and some of the work we're doing. It's not just our statistics that we're tracking, but also the GTA, which is generally the most affected in Ontario. But for example, so far this year in 2023, we've had over 5,000 vehicles stolen. Last year we had
That's GTA?
No, that's us in Peel.
Just us in Peel, wow.
Yeah, and per capita, unfortunately, because of the logistics, the roadways, the ability to move vehicles across the province and into others, we are just naturally a little bit more susceptible. So that's the bad news. Often when people
Did
think,
you just call us the car theft capital?
I don't think I use those words.
Chief Demke and I are in a foot race to not be number one on
It's
that.
very discouraging.
No, definitely, it is. And it's something that we're struggling with. My reply to that, and where I find some comfort, is it's deeply affecting our region and residents.
Yeah, it
but
really
we
is.
are incredibly invested, if not more invested, from a policing perspective than anywhere else in the country, and not just in helping our own, but also in moving it forward as a national and international conversation, which we've had some success in. And then the only thing I would maybe, it's always good to find a little bit of good news.
Yes.
We heard about carjackings. Carjackings in other municipalities, and ours for that matter, are probably some of the most traumatic. And often people lump them together with car theft. And just for interest's sake, that's the use of violence against a person and take their car. In Peel, I'm happy to report that we are down in our numbers of carjackings from last year. In fact, almost 7.5%, 8%. And that's due in large part because of some enforcement efforts. Now, despite being down in the number of carjacking incidents that have happened, we are up in charges and arrests being made. And very shortly, we'll be announcing the results of another project that's oriented towards the enforcement. But and for context, in Peel so far this year, there's been 68.
68. Wow.
68 total.
I think people had a really heightened awareness of carjackings after the hockey player. Mitch Marner, Mitch Marner had his car hijacked in a parking lot of a movie theater, I think, in Etobicoke. Just final question, but it might be worthwhile to have kind of a virtual town hall rather than try to go neighborhood by neighborhood, because I know that we would get a large number of people out that are very interested in learning on how they can better protect themselves, and maybe we do that as a result of the summit or as an adjunct to the summit. I'm not sure. And then finally, I know that you are working with auto manufacturers, insurers, et cetera, on better ways to install security devices to prevent car thefts. If there's any news on new technology, if you could share.
I'd mentioned at the beginning of the update that we are working with auto manufacturers. One of the things that we are looking at is that technology piece, because obviously people who are technically inclined are able to defeat some security systems. I probably would not share the people and groups I'm working with.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
A few points here, and glad that Peel Region's continuing to take a lead in combating auto thefts. That 50% recovery rate, that's encouraging. We need to get that out more. I don't think there's necessarily a public awareness that it's that high. You mentioned the total for this year. Was it 121 million? I missed the number you said.
127 million recovered.
Recovered, that's great. I remember being astonished when I heard, I think it was from yourself or Chief Nish, that auto thefts is now the third largest revenue tool for organized crime in Canada. I remember a meeting with the Minister of Public Safety, and his response at the time was, when we were challenging him to do more at the port, he said, we're focused on guns. And I said, this is a revenue source to purchase guns. What do you think organized crime does when they have funds? It leads to the challenges that we face. I know there was a reference to we don't want to be the capital of auto theft. My understanding, just to clarify, is that when I saw the numbers of increases, they're very similar across all major urban areas. I think I saw in York Region, they had a 134% increase over 2 years. I think we were in the 100% range. Toronto was an 80%. And so this seems to be a major problem across the greater Toronto, Hamilton area. It's certainly not singular to Peel Region. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely, it is. It's something that's affecting us here in the GTA, provincially and nationally. And for that matter, last year we had over $1 billion in vehicles stolen from the country and predicted as being exported out of the country. This year, it will be higher. So definitely, we aren't the only ones that are suffering with this issue.
When we first started hearing about this, and obviously as public servants and members of the police board, we respond to the calls we get, and I've been inundated with calls on auto thefts that pierces everyone's sense of safety when their car is stolen in front of them. And when everyone has a story from every neighborhood, that it gains a lot of traction. And my initial criticism was, how is it so easy to steal cars? And I asked for a meeting with the vehicle manufacturers and met with them, their association in my Brampton office, and I know they attended the Auto Summit. One point they had, which was compelling, was in some types of cars, there are as many cars stolen in Canada as there is the U.S., despite it's 10 times the size, and that we have become a source country for stolen vehicles. Why do you think it's so much higher on a per capita basis in Canada than the U.S.?
It's a complex question to answer. I think there's probably a few different levels to why it's occurring here in Canada more often than it is in the U.S. Everything from sentencing and the legislative piece to our ability to prosecute those cases, certainly our ports, absolutely the ability to export something. The easier that is, it becomes difficult. I don't think there's any arguing that. Place oriented towards auto theft. It's a relatively new phenomenon that has evolved out of the pandemic and supply shortages. So, policing at the time, for example, Peel, we didn't have as many people committed to investigating these things from an enforcement perspective. So this is why it's so important. When we look for the reasons why it's so high in Canada, there isn't one single source of the issue. And it's why it's so important that when we build our response strategy, and we came out with recommendations, it needs to be a well-balanced curriculum of strategies to oppose organized auto theft. CBSA, policing, enforcement on a provincial level, prevention, the industry, actually looking at how their vehicles are being stolen. That's how we're going to begin to turn down the dial on the issue and how we're hoping to do it.
When the Vehicles Association made the comment, they said, as soon as we find a new security device, organized crime, in some short time after that, we'll find a workaround. So it's not necessarily technology, it's knowing where there's money to be made, there'll be a motivation to beat whatever the latest security is. And so I'm mindful that was a fair commentary they made, and at least they attended our Auto Theft Summit. I know last year we had CBSA at the back of the room, but they were not part of the summit. And I know you said there's no singular reason, but they're a big part of the solution. I keep on hearing Port of Montreal, Port of Montreal, Port of Montreal. Can we get them to be part of the summit this year? Or they seem to be one of the missing links.
I believe we, yeah, definitely. So, post the summit and behind the scenes, we've certainly been working with CBSA. I think they, along with police, have recognized what an issue it is, and are definitely more committed to partnering with us and industry to help begin addressing it. So I think you could expect to see them at the summit. In fact, in a few short weeks, I expect to see them at the port. So looking forward to those conversations.
Well, and I certainly drew that out of the Auto Theft Summit. I sat there and listened, and I was fascinated by the commonality of all the different chiefs of police. And Nish, you commanded a large audience of chiefs of some of the best minds in public safety around the GTHA, and they were all talking about that concern of the port. And so I look forward to hearing what the solutions are on that. That thing I want to get out there, and if there's public watching on our live stream, is I know there's frustration sometimes when you call the Peel Police and you don't feel that immediate response. I think we need to do a better job and letting people know that if there's not someone sent to your home when the car is already 5 hours away, probably on the route to the Port of Montreal, it's because there's a police officer attending to an immediate danger, where human life could be at risk. I don't think there's not necessarily appreciation for how busy everyone is working. And so there is a sentiment in the community that we don't care. But if anything, the fact that the auto theft unit has been doubled, leading the Auto Theft Summit for policing in Canada, leading the conversation on CBSA. What I try to articulate is that there's no police force in the country that's showing as much energy and interest in trying to solve that. So I'd love to look at ways that we could better communicate the work you're doing. and let residents know, I've heard it from you, but I'd love to get on the record how quickly a stolen property can get to Montreal. There's an assumption that if it's stolen at 1 a.m., then when it's recognized at 8 a.m., that it's only a few kilometers away. When I know there's instances where it's already in the port by that time. And so how quickly have you seen it, stolen vehicles, get to the port, and how can we better communicate what the Peel Police is doing? And that's my last question.
Thank you, Your Worship. To answer your first question, you're right, incredibly quick. Oftentimes, by the time people recognize that the car's been stolen in the morning, it's already on a container. And, obviously, there's a bit of distance between us and that port. So we're talking hours, very fast. And then hours later, it's out of the country. Again, I would encourage people to watch that segment, and maybe I'll share that with the board. But, there was... CBC actually went to another country and started going through used car lots, opening glove compartments, and you could find the names and addresses of people who owned the car and had only reported it stolen several days prior. And it was already up for sale with an Ontario license plate. So that gives you an idea of the scope of it. But how we push out that narrative of the work that is being done, I really believe in the need to, it's things like the summit. It's the support, obviously, of the board, of our community leadership and officials. It's taking the opportunity to celebrate the wins and also sharing some of the pressures and issues that we are having. As I mentioned, a lot of our community knows about carjackings and knows about car theft. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, the double-edged sword to that is it does create some anxiety, but their understanding of the issue and what is happening, at least in some part, should be informed by our external communications. Included in that also needs to be what we're doing to address it. So, I think we need to continue with that third recommendation. Any opportunity we have to elevate awareness, promote our successes, and share what the issues are openly with our community, that's how we're going to help them understand the scope of the issue and what we are, as a police service, are doing to address it.
Thank you, Mr. Boughton.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. A couple of things. How many cars or autos do you think we'll have stolen this year, total? Over 5,000?
Oh, yeah. Definitely over 5,000.
Okay. So can you imagine if 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, that somebody threw that number out and said, guess what? In 2023, you're going to have 5,000 plus vehicles stolen. You'd think they bump their, yeah, they're crazy. I mean, really, we wouldn't believe it. So a couple of comments, and firstly, the CBC issue or segment that was on, where you were on, it was incredibly well done. It was really, really well done. And with you visiting Montreal, you haven't gone yet, is that correct, Deputy?
No, I haven't been there myself. My team has, but it's one of those things that I feel it's important enough. I need to go in person and see.
Yeah, I agree. And as most people know, I have a transportation background. And when you get there and see in the Port of Montreal that you get 6,000 plus containers outbound every single day, and if they start to do some inspections on them, they might be 20 or 30 in a day of 6,000 going out. That's the reality. I think one of the things that you will see, Deputy, when you're there, is how overwhelming it will be from the number of containers that are moved every day. But having said that, we have to start somewhere. The other couple of other things, I understand through the insurance folks that the hot list. There's going to be hot lists of cars. So whether it be a Ford F-150 pickup truck or a Lexus or whatever it is, that the insurance companies are going to now start to add a $500 annual premium to your bill if you choose to purchase a vehicle that's on the hot list of cars that are being stolen. This, to me, will increase the level of concern by the manufacturers, because if I was looking to buy a Lexus model RX 350, and I've got something I'm going to share with you after on it. And I know I have to pay $500 more a year. I might go to a manufacturer like General Motors and go to the Chevy store who should advertise, you should buy us for safety, buy a vehicle from us. It's a vehicle nobody wants. Right? Yeah, right. No, seriously, you think about it. And for all of us in this chamber and anybody who's watching, does anybody know of any individual who hasn't been personally affected by the theft of a vehicle? You can't go to any social gathering, any business gathering where there isn't people or there aren't people there that they'll say, oh, my brother, my sister, my neighbor, whatever. It's so rampant. It's everywhere. And if we got 5,000 vehicles being stolen a year, we have 50% recovery rate. But can you imagine from a thief's perspective? You can steal a vehicle, $100,000 vehicle in 2 minutes. I don't know where else you can make $100,000 in 2 minutes unless you're an actor in Hollywood or a hockey player. But that's in 2 minutes. And I'm not far off on that number, correct, Deputy? That a couple of minutes?
Very correct, if not quicker at times.
Yeah, exactly. So, having said that, the manufacturers, I think, will be even more concerned. At our last police conference or car theft conference, I asked the Manufacturers Association about information I had received that if you put a disabling device on your vehicle, that they void the warranties. And I asked the question for those of you who were there, and they didn't answer the question. And I didn't restate the question to them because I really didn't want to embarrass them when I was there. And I think, Deputy, you remember me asking that question. I think they should be a little more receptive this year. And as I indicated to you earlier this morning, there are some newer technologies that are coming out. We need to have all those players in the room, including the association that represents all the manufacturers. And they should be very concerned that people will not be buying their vehicles because they're so nice that they want to be stolen. So I think you're doing a great job. Difficult at times. I have an email that I'm going to walk around to you that I've already shared with the chief on response from a citizen who I know well in Port Credit that the Peel police didn't come out while she was watching the attempted theft on her vehicle and was told, we've got other things that are more important to do. So, your $100,000 vehicle doesn't mean anything. So I'll share that with you, but that then gets a life. People talk about it because PRP doesn't care because my vehicle was being stolen and I called them and they said, I'm sorry, we're too busy to come out. We can't have that. And there's a bit of a lack of faith in what PRP is doing. And I know we know you're doing a great job, but the public has to understand all the steps. The next auto theft summit, I think, will be even better than the last one because the Manufacturers Association, the manufacturers themselves, the insurance companies are all got to step up and be part of the solution rather than go, well, it's just the way things are. So keep up the good work to all of you, and Chief, through your chair to Chief and all the team. I know you're doing your best. Very, very difficult, but when you can steal a $100,000 vehicle in 45 seconds or a minute or whatever, guess what? Low-hanging fruit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair Coley, please.
Thank you through you, Chair, and I promise to be quick because we're still on the Chief's update and it's 1 hour in. Actually, a lot of really good points made already earlier. I think the only thing is more of an observation, a suggestion, because yes, you're right. There's not a person who doesn't know auto theft or is not discussing it or it's not affecting them. I think what may be a gap here is because we are very much aware of the incredible amount of work that's happening behind the scenes for recovery. You just stated quite a few, and I know there's been press conferences, but I think from a community perspective, and I know you're already attempting to be part of as many sessions as possible, but I think now with a lot of, for example, councillors and mayors, I know many will be doing their own community engagement. I think the more updates, the possible, because I think what they're not seeing is the work and the recovery that is happening. So it's, yes, there is auto thefts, but there's an incredible amount of work that's being done by you and your team. And I think that's something they're not aware. I mean, I know that we're in individual conversations and we can't even help start sharing some of those stats. But I think from a community perspective, it would be very helpful to hear some of that, because not everybody watches the press conference updates, right? Or they might miss the clip. So I think that would be a valuable. I think Mayor Crombie made a interesting suggestion about the virtual town hall, and maybe it becomes more of an update. So it could almost be a, maybe not a monthly, but a quarterly, just something out there. And, you know, we can all share the links and the date it's happening, but it could literally be, here's kind of where we're at, here's what's been happening, here's some of the things we did this past quarter, here's the meetings we're happening, like even the border services. I mean, from Port of Montreal, like not everybody understands that journey. And listen, we've all been affected. My own sister had her car stolen at the start of this year, and it becomes not just a theft, it's the time you go through insurance to actually be able to get a car. So it becomes a much more difficult. You know, if you're a parent with one car and that's your car to drive your kids, and now you're going to have to wait, you know, till you get to that. So yes, it is emotional, but I do maybe suggest, because you just shared so many great facts in just the update you just did. So I think it might be something, just an ongoing perspective to continue to share out. That's all.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Before we close on the file, Chief, maybe over to you if you had a last word before you introduce the next subject.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the board for your comments. We do continue to be committed to all the levels of advocacy that need to happen. And some of the conversation as it pertains to how people's feelings are about our ability to respond actually set up the next conversation very well, Chair. Deputy O'Doherty would like to provide an update on some of the work and impact that's happening at our 911 Communication Center, which we know has got a direct correlation to not just this, but the overall response to the community.
Good morning, and through the chair, and I will be brief. As I promised to come back to the board to update on the 911 communications strategy that we implemented last year called Pathway 2025, and certainly Pathway 2025 doesn't suggest that we would answer calls immediately only in 2025. It's a pathway and a strategy to get there to holistically improve service to the community. I wanted to provide the following updates. Just so the board is aware, the board had approved 10 net new positions in last year's budget. And of course, there will be net new positions here. 162 people currently work in our communication center. And we have hired over the last year 63 net new communicators. And that has significantly assisted us. I want to also remind the community and the board that the 911 Communication Center answered almost 1 million calls through that center last year. That's up about 40%. There's about 750,000 911 calls that comes through that communication center. And almost 38% of those calls are considered misuse calls. Each one of those calls gets a call back from a call taker. Every call back takes approximately 1 minute. That's about 200 hours per month of callback for misuse calls. That's equivalent to 5 full-time people a month just answering misuse calls. We are happy to report, though, over the same time last year, almost a 50% decrease in wait times due to the increase in staffing and some of the other strategic implementations that have to do with technology, the way we staff, and certainly some of the new impending technology decisions, one which I want to highlight right now. One of the main factors that will also substantially decrease call wait times over the next 12-month period is an implementation of a technology called Next Generation 911. Peel was one of the first to purchase this technology. It is in the provisioning and implementation and should be fully implemented in November this year. 911 allows for 2 specific technology pieces to substantially decrease call times. One of those pieces is called a call screener option. The technology today does not allow a call taker to screen calls for emergency and misuse without dropping vital information that would need to go to other emergency services like ambulance and fire. So we can at this point not do that. In November, we will have the ability to call screen and substantially reduce wait times. The second piece that Next Generation 911 helps our call takers and communicators deal with is the ability for automation to happen in relation to how we receive those calls and how fast they come into a queue and are split to our dispatchers. This is a very important piece because that too will allow call takers to focus on emergency calls. And I'm sorry, part of that second piece of technology also allows the identification of misuse calls so that they do not enter the call center and are not responded to immediately. So we feel that we will report back after November, after we have some substantial data over the next few months on call wait times. And to be fully transparent, NENA standards, which are the standards across Canada for answering 911 calls, suggest that 90% of 911 calls should be answered within 15 seconds and 95% of 911 calls should be answered within 20 seconds. Currently, the Peel Regional Police, after a 46% increase in calls over the last 2 years, this year to date, we're answering, the call wait times were 90 seconds. We have decreased that by about 50%, and we are down to somewhere around the 45-second call. And that's my update. Thank you.
So over to questions then, Vice Chair Coley.
Firstly, that's an amazing update. That's incredible to hear because I know that the 38% misuse was something that kept coming up with the number of calls that we do get. I do want to say, before I do ask the question is, I do want to say the individuals that work in this department, I'm so happy to hear that the additional that came on are getting trained and now part of the team. They do incredible work. They're dedicated. I've had personally visited the centers twice now, and they work very hard, but with a lot of care, and that matters to a lot of us and what they do for the community. So thank you. Just a big shout out to them. They're there. But in terms of this screening ability, I just wanted to understand. So when they're on the call, this will allow them to hear what's happening before they actually have to take the call. Is that what you mean in terms of the screening?
Somewhat. Call screening allows us to dedicate staffing just to answering the calls as they come in immediately and discern whether or not it is an emergency, non-emergency, and then where that call should go, either police, fire, ambulance. And that is really the biggest and largest delay. Currently, the technology does not allow us to do that without dropping vital information once the call is transferred to another emergency service.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. And this is great work. Thank you.
Mayor Brown.
Thank you. And this is a topic I was very interested in today. The chief knows. You know, hear your presentation, and it's really encouraging that we're tackling this and there's progress being made. The public impression is that 911's a mess right now. There's that global news story of allegation that someone was on hold for 9 minutes while someone was in their home. I know when that was looked at, it wasn't the same length of time that was alleged, but the length of times, whether it's short or not shorter, is just not acceptable in terms of a region that's as prosperous as ours. And I know no one in the police leadership wants that. No police officer wants to hear that. I know it's an issue of resources. Last year we added 10 new civilian staff to 911. I understand that's helped get us from a 90-second average wait to 70-second average wait. But we're a busy jurisdiction. There was a story that was shared where, in some smaller communities, a 911 operation, the folks working there can read a book. In our operations center, people don't even get lunches. And so we have to solve this. And if it's a resource issue, we have to solve it. And, initially I asked this to be a discussion item, and so we could do a motion and refer it to budget committee. I know, Chief, you are faced with a challenge that there are so many different areas of the police that you need additional resources for. But I think this is one that we're going to have to attend to. And so What is the average wait time in Canada for 911? Do we know, or Ontario? How does our 70 seconds compare?
Depending on jurisdiction, we do not do well, Mayor, just to be full, frank, and fair on that. I think if you were to travel to the east of us, you would find something similar. But I was visiting 2 call centers 2 weeks ago to the west of us, well to the west and southwest of us, where they had 0 wait time. And yes, staff were reading books and catching up on current events. I would like to tell you that our call wait time is unsatisfactory. It is at 45 seconds, which is half of what it was last year. And thanks to the board and to the staffing increases, almost every single one of those call taker chairs are filled. And so there's a technology component here that will also be required, but there is also a staffing and resource component that needs to grow with the community.
You know, and I understand that when that incident happened that was all over the news, there was a homicide, arson, a carjacking, and a shooting all at the same time. Is that family home invasion? And so it's a busy.
And Mayor, just to clarify, and that was at 3:30 a.m.
Yeah. And so, you know, I know we have a challenge, and I know we need to answer. It doesn't look great for us when you compare it to other jurisdictions. Part of fixing a problem is acknowledging we have a problem, and so we can make sure you have the resources to fix it. How many, just so we can get this, be prepared for this, how many civilians additionally would it take for us to get down to a near no wait time?
We've done some analysis on this, and I think the answer really lies in, as of November, when the new technology is implemented, we'll be able to have a better handle. However, we do feel we're about 10 to 15 communicators still outside of where our ideal range is right now. Again, I would just remind that we're at approximately 162 communication staff. Part of those are support staff. They do not take calls. They maintain the systems and are required to maintain the systems. And we are currently staffed at the level or just a couple below. It depends. Day to day will be plus or minus.
And Your Worship, I think, as you know, part of the facilities plan is there's no more space too in the comm center, which is, you know, one of our original buildings. So part of the build out for the new comm center will allow capacity to also supplement that. It's incremental. It's heartbeats, it's technology, and it's bricks and mortar that all kind of equate to it.
Well, whatever we can do to move the yardstick forward this year, we have capacity for. I want to see that. The public wants to see that, and I know, when it comes to public safety, no one wants us to see us cut any corners. When it comes to something as critical as 911, those are, I have to speak to just harrowing descriptions of the incidents that they've gone through, and so glad that we're tackling this. And the other aspect I want to touch from a different angle. Now, I understand there's some days there's like 2,000 calls, right?
That's correct.
And how many of those would be sort of inappropriate calls?
I believe Anthony has a number, but sometimes we do see 2,000 to 3,000 911 calls, and 40%, 38%, I think, is misuse.
Per month, we spend 200 person hours dealing with misuse calls, and there's about 400 or 500 a day that can come in which are misuse.
So, just speaking hypothetically of different ways to tackle this, I understand if someone's got a cell phone and they inadvertently call 911, it was not intentional. It was as said to my left, a butt dial. But if someone's calling the police because their pizza hasn't arrived, that's negligent and inappropriate. And so I know we do get calls of people who should not be calling 911. And we've done public relations campaigns saying don't do that, but it still happens. Is there any tool where there could be a fine for inappropriately calling 911? You know, and I think you can have a broad degree of discretion if, you know, if someone's, you know, but something clearly inappropriate that's wasting police resources. Is there any tools like that to help discourage, you know, the inappropriate use of 911?
Thank you. And through the chair, what I do want to add just before I get to that is a few months ago, Peel Regional Police hosted the largest 911 communicators conference in Canada. And that was a topic that was discussed in the room. And you will see that around Canada, there are both formal and informal approaches to fines and or other measures that discourage and help reduce calls in relation to improper use. As a committee, we are looking, we have not defined what that could be yet, or even if it's appropriate. But I think that's just an ongoing conversation that really needs to be had within the community. By the way, Peel also is has made an organizational decision in the 911 Communication Center to call back each and every misuse call to ensure our community members are safe. And other jurisdictions don't all do that, and hence why 911 times perhaps in other jurisdictions may appear to be more favorable.
Well, I'm glad that's being examined. I know when we looked at the municipal automated speed enforcement devices, it changed behaviors where they're put up. You hit someone's pocketbook for negligent behavior, it does make a difference. And just maybe my last question is, so the public understands what you're dealing with in terms of the high call volumes. Can you share, and you've done this before, a few examples of the type of wasteful calls you're receiving?
Thank you. And I should mention that we are launching a very large and broad communication campaign about misuse calls in 911. Thank you to Charles and team for doing that. We've received calls, and I just happened to pull this up, and this is obvious without proper or previous conversation in relation to you know, not getting a right order at Tim Hortons, or waking up and the desired food perhaps wasn't on a table. We've also received emergency calls in relation to TV channels not working. And I don't want to misrepresent to say that these are all the 700 and 1,000 misuse calls, but we get a significant number that the public requires the education on. And as of Monday, in fact, we have a very aggressive media campaign along with our other public safety partners and the region and both municipalities. And you will notice that when you drive in and out of the region of Peel, that there are public service announcement and signs relating to when to call 911 and the alternative numbers.
And I'm glad you illustrated that, because those people that call for inappropriate purposes like that, the family that is terrified by the home invasion, they're contributing to the weight. And so these negligent calls have some ownership in the challenge we're facing. And if we do end up having fines for individuals like that, I think it would be entirely appropriate.
Thank you. Mr. Boughton.
First thing I'd like to do is one-up our deputy here. I've been, our deputy chair, I've been to communications 3 times, and you've only been twice. Just thought I'd throw that in. 973,000 911 calls last year, I believe is the number, right? Your worship, Mayor Brown and I had exchanged a number of some emails back and forth in regard to the episode that happened with the break-in that was going live. And I actually took a photograph of the screen from Global that was on, and it showed the call at 3:23 a.m. and they stayed on the line for 1 minute. At 3:25, they went back. They went back on 911 and stayed for 3 minutes, and finally connected at 3:28, and they stayed on. That was when the information was passed through. I said this at an earlier meeting, Chair, thank you for taking my call yesterday, and I did discuss this with the Chair. I brought this up some number of meetings ago that the John Q public needs to be better informed, that not to hang up when they call in. And one of the things that I saw from the comm center and Vice Chair Samita Kohli was with me on this, is that there's an incident at Square One, for example, and there's a robbery or, somebody's brandished a gun. How many 911 calls come in relative to a single event, and then they stack, right? And then people just hang up and call, hang up and call, hang up and call, and then you have to clear them. So we need to do a better job. And I don't know if that starts with the education system, where the kids, every kid knows to dial 911, but I don't think they get the principle that if somebody doesn't answer right away, that they hang up and call again. We need to do a better job educating the public that when you call 911, you need to stay on, and also you shouldn't call if you didn't get the pepperoni on your pizza. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Carby.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deputy Chief Adwadi, for the comprehensive update. The one area that I had a question on, and I think the last series of questions by Mayor Brown kind of helped to highlight it, is around the misuse calls. So thank you for the updates you have given there. So it has kind of alleviated the need for my question. So I simply will leave with a thank you to the men and women in the communication center. I've had the opportunity, as a newbie, I've only done one visit. So I think I'm falling behind here on visits. But thank you to the men and women there who are doing an incredible job in under-resourced. It's a very tight quarters, and clearly we need to move on providing them with more supports there. And I heard the update around the next steps or long-term planning around expanding the communication center to be able to better meet the needs of our community. So I'll just leave with a thank you to the men and women who are doing a great job in spite of their difficult circumstances. Thank you.
Mr. Carby, thank you very much, because it leads into what the chair was thinking, maybe at 35,000 feet. You think of the life of a call taker. They often say when a police officer shows up beside you, you're probably not having a great day. 100% of the time when that phone rings, it's not a great day for someone. And you get beat up with this for all these shifts, et cetera, et cetera. No different than when a police officer has to go out and perform their duty. And I also want to commend my regional staff, because the point I wanted to make is this. People inherently know what their job is and how it compares to anybody else. The point I make is, for example, if you're a mailman or a mailwoman, you kind of know what mailmen or mailwomen get paid down the street, the next jurisdiction over, in another province. To all those people that showed up to work today for the Region of Peel, for the police service, they know their salaries are comparable all across the province. What they also know is re-emphasized today. I could be a call taker, and somewhere else I could be knitting in between calls or reading. I could be the officer looking after the downtown, and their biggest problem is they get lonely on a midnight shift. And that doesn't happen here. But what they also know is I can move to that jurisdiction, get paid virtually the same, and for the equity in my home, forget about my big mortgage in the Region of Peel or in the Greater Toronto area, I can buy a palace over there. And yet you show up every day to work in the Region of Peel at a police service. And on behalf of the board and on behalf of the regions, I just wanted to say thank you, because I know you have other options, and yet you're sticking it out for us. And I am grateful. And this underlies it, the analogy with regards to the call takers, that in other jurisdictions, kind of boring here, the phone's not ringing, maybe I'll just read a book. And we have people that can't go to the washroom during their shift. So thank you. Okay, very good discussion, much more to come, and a great update, Chief. Thank you very much. Chief, that's it for the updates for now. Thank you. So with that, I now go to member questions and announcements. So to my members, Member Vice Chair Kohli.
Thank you, through you, Chair. A couple of updates, because it is our first board meeting after coming back from the summer, so there's been a lot of activities, but I just wanted to do a quick shout out or recognize a few initiatives. So one is, obviously, we are excited to say we held our first governance and human rights community consultation. Big thank you to Professor Akwasi Akambe for all his help in getting us to this journey of getting these public consultations going. It's been a discussion for over a year with us in planning and how do we do this. And the whole point of these consultations was for us to have the opportunity to listen to the community. I can say our first session was full. We had 11 members present, and I do want to thank Chair Unica for being there and Board Member Ahmed Atia for being there as well. But it was just thank you to everybody who came out and presented. It meant a lot to us, and it was really enlightening to hear all the consultations and updates. In addition, I just want to let you know our next one is October 3rd, and then we have one on November 28th. So if you've not submitted and you'd like the opportunity to present, you very much can. Second thing I wanted to also recognize was the Youth in Policing initiative that happened this summer. Once again, and I believe we surpassed numbers from even the past years, but it was fantastic to be both at the launch and then at the closing, the graduation. Once again, great work done by Chief, Deputy Pat, and your entire teams. It was amazing to see these kids go through the journey, and just hearing the valedictorian speak about their experience was phenomenal. So great job in that. I also want to mention that you guys held the Cops for Cancer event, very emotional event. I know Deputy Pat also shaved his head in honor of the event. His hair has grown back, so that's good. But it was very emotional. But they raised funds for pediatric cancer, and it was a great event and well organized. And finally, I wanted to also recognize we had an opportunity to do a ride along this summer with the Marine Unit. And it was something for me. So thank you for Deputy Nick Milenovich for getting that organized. I did want to mention the individuals who actually took time to actually spend with us and do that ride along. And by myself and Board Member Lynn Carby actually did that. And just a great big thank you to Constable Darcy Peterson, Constable Brian Mortozzi, Constable Andrew Cade, and Sergeant Greg Teague. Very much, it was phenomenal. I can't say what an enlightening session that was. The amount of water and coverage they do, and the amount of work that they do out there, which we were not aware. So a great big thank you. And finally, I just wanted to say Emancipation Day was also held this summer. It was a great event at the head office. Board Member Lynn Carby did an update on behalf of the board and a presentation, so thank you for that. But it was a really good event and well organized, so thank you for that as well.
Thank you. Seeing no other update or questions or announcements from the board, I now go to the approval of the minutes from the meeting of June 23, 2023, as moved by Vice Chair Coley and Mr. Atia. Are there any questions with regards to the minutes? Seeing none, are there any opposed? That is carried. That brings us to deputations. Our first deputation is Keep 6 Organization deputation request received on July 11.
Mr. Chair?
Madam Mayor, did you have something? Go ahead.
Mr. Board Member Atia can't second the minutes as he wasn't there.
Oh, my apologies. Mr. Boughton, thank you, Bonnie. Seconded by Mr. Boughton instead. All those in favor, that is carried. Thank you. So our first deputation, Keep the 6 Organization. Ms. Nelia DiBiase is here, Executive Director, regarding the organization's work with individuals from marginalized communities who have had or are at risk of having dealings with the criminal justice system. Ms. DiBiase, welcome. Please come right forward. And you have 5 minutes before I go to questions. Come right up here. You're right up here. Make yourself comfortable, please. Welcome. And you're going to pull that mic a little closer to you, and there should be a little button that you hit because I want to hear you. You've gone to a lot of trouble. We'd love to hear you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've handed out some, what I call my book here. So I'm just going to go through some of the key points, and I have a digitized copy to send all of you. So good morning. My name is Nelia DiBiase, and I serve as Executive Director for a nonprofit organization called Keep 6. And on behalf of our founder, Board of Directors, staff, and volunteers, we thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today. We'll share with you a little bit of the work that we do with youth from marginalized communities who have had dealings with the criminal justice system. I'm going to speak specifically to young Black men, and with what I heard today and some of the issues that are going on in Peel, these are the young Black men that I work with. So when we speak about the pharmacy robberies, when we speak about the car thefts, these are the young men that I work with. So it's no secret that young Black men are overrepresented per capita in the Canadian prison system. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of these young men whose voices have been suppressed and who have ultimately been failed by a system throughout their lives. When referring to a system, I'm speaking to one or more of the following. Could be a family system, a health system, the education system, a social system, or their own internal system. Keep Six understands at a high level that to combat the growing crime issues that we must identify the root cause of the issue, which has led this individual to make the improper choice of committing an unlawful act. Keep Six operates from a holistic lens where accountability by those who we serve is central. Our clients must hold themselves accountable first for their actions and the effects that they have caused to their victims. We operate on 3 pillars. One is prevention, intervention, and advocacy, and these pillars work unanimously together. I'm going to give you a little bit of information on our client profile. So our clients are young men in the age range between 18 and 35, predominantly of African American descent. They are gang members, convicted of drug trafficking, weapons offenses, attempted murder, human trafficking. Also, we work with parents and families of these individuals that have been convicted of the above infractions. We're in a little bit, I've worked in the United States with many gang members, many offenders, and there's a big difference between our offenders in Canada and the offenders in the United States. The level of intelligence in the United States per offender surpasses the level of intelligence per offender of these same crimes in the United States. So our mission is not to open prison doors. Our mission is to rehabilitate individuals while they are still serving a sentence, as this allows us at Keep Six to monitor them and work with them as they begin the journey to adjust their habits and their mindsets. And sharing with you numbers from January 1st to September 20th, 2023, I have a caseload of 87 young men. 82 of those young men are Black, 3 of them are white, and 2 are other. The value of that book of business, as we call it, is in the range of $10,984,011. What that means that every day those 87 individuals together in jail for a year, $10,984. Give you a little bit about the history of the young men that we work with. 60, and I'm blind too, so 68 of them suffered childhood abuse. 37 of them have been diagnosed with mental health issues. So 81 of them have a learning disability or have been diagnosed with learning disabilities. 87 of them grew up in Ontario housing. 85 of them come from single parent households. And here is something that we really must take note of them. 79 of these individuals have children. So what does that mean? We have to start working with them to break that cycle, to break that chain, because their children, in exposing them to crime and what's going on, we're breeding future offenders. 4 of them are in active addiction. 2 of those in active addiction, fentanyl, became addicted in prison. So we have a program called Gangs for Tuition, and that is the program that we work with these guys hand in hand. And it's all in your package, so you can see the process and how we, our intake process and all that wonderful stuff. So to date, Keep Six currently stands at a 0% recidivism rate, which means that not one of the individuals that we work with have gone back. And it's our goal to develop an ongoing collaboration with Peel Regional Police Services as an integral part of our mandate of crime prevention and rehabilitation. Together, we can reduce the stigma. I wanted to bring two guys with me today. They were afraid. Right. So it's very important to be able to bring that trust back to police, community policing, and these individuals. So on behalf of the board of directors, our president Opal McKenzie, our founder Richard Miller, staff and volunteers, and the men and women who we serve, we thank all members of Peel Regional Police. We thank all members of the board for your service to our community.
Thank you very much. And there's questions. Mr. Carby.
First of all, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. DiBiase, for coming and sharing with us today a little bit about the work you are doing with this specifically challenged part of our community. I've had the pleasure of working with you and your team to be able to address some of the issues, and I know the challenges you face, especially as it relates to funding. And operating primarily on a shoestring budget and very often out of your own pockets to be able to address some of these issues. And my hope is that we will see the work you are doing as a significant part of our community well-being plan and not just a focus on apprehension, but here through the work you're doing can focus a little bit on prevention. One particular statistic you shared, which kind of hit me, is the 0% recidivism, which is just incredible. That the work you're doing is preventing the recommitment or involvement in criminal. Do face in the region is young men who are just released on bail, are back committing the same activities again. So clearly you're achieving some measure of success. So much so that we're focused here on dealing with bail reform and all of that to be able to keep some of these repeat apprehenders, incarcerated. But if your program is having this measure of success, I feel we should, as a community, be leaning forward in this kind of approach in terms of addressing community safety. So again, thank you for the work you're doing. And my hope is that through the appropriate teams that help address these issues in the community, you'll get more support in the work you're doing to keep some of these young men from re-engaging in behaviors that are harmful to our community. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie.
Thank you for coming forward today. Very interesting, especially the commonalities between the individuals and how much they share. Single parented families or living in subsidized housing, mental health, childhood abuse was pretty shocking. Then, of course, learning disabilities. My questions to you are, how are you funded?
So the founder of our company, Richard Miller, he founded this. He was actually in a halfway home. So he was an ex-offender himself. He works construction, and he noticed a gap in 2017, and that's how he funded it. He works for MTO, and we've received some little grants from the Rotary Club of Brampton, but yes, it comes out of our pockets. We will have guys that are coming out of jail with no family to go home to, no clothing.
My goodness.
What do? What do? I go to Winners. I go where I can. I buy them clothing so that they can go to a job interview. We've had donations. I buy them food. They don't have food, right? And there's so many aspects of it. I have reached out to the Solicitor General and the Attorney General because of the gaps that I notice within the system. And you as officers also know that there are those of you who are. Let's take a look at the mental health system. Let's take a look at the forms, right? Get put on a Form 2 or Form 3. What happens? They get out afterwards. They challenge it. They get out, right? When they get out, what happens? 3 weeks later, they're back in. There you are, picking them up again to take them to the hospital for an assessment. There is a problem as well, because in the prison system, the health care is not being, it's not by OHIP, if you will. So it's a separate entity that looks over the health care. We've had many instances where they're giving medication, antipsychotic medication, to these young men to get them to sleep. What happens when they come out of jail?
They're addicted.
They're either addicted or they don't have their records. They don't know. You're taking an antipsychotic. What do I do? You can't just go off an antipsychotic. You need to wean off. You need to understand. That doesn't happen. I have a young man right now who's in bail. He's on house arrest and he's under my supervision. 18 years old, went in. What happened? He was given Seroquel. And Cam H has done a review on this as well. He was given Seroquel. Well, he went home. He didn't continue taking the Seroquel. He shot up a restaurant in Mississauga.
I find it troubling that you don't get financial assistance for the great work that you do. And I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of us, and maybe we'll think of some strategies for you. Have you applied for any Trillium grants ever?
We have applied for a Trillium grant, have not heard back. Part of the Safer Communities grant as well for Peel Region, we've heard from them. And that's about it. So
is anyone aware if there are any grants?
I think through you, Chair, and Mayor Crombie, Ms. DiBiase, it's me over here. I know I'm not the tallest speaker here, but we'd be happy to connect with you offline, because there are pathways between us, between Deputy DePat and Milanovich. You know, first thing came to mind was the Building Safer Communities Fund, which the Chair would be aware of. But there may be other opportunities. One of our goals is, and first of all, I want to say we're thankful to continue to work with you in different capacities in the relationship we have. We'll happily work with you to see if there's some gateways and to strengthen your organization. We do believe in your work, and it's doing remarkable impact on individuals. So thank you.
Thank you. My final question is that you mentioned you're looking for ways to bring back trust.
That's right.
How would you do that?
So we'll take a look at me, right? Speaking about marginalized communities, there's the elephant in the room. I'm white, right? It doesn't matter if I'm white. They have an issue, and a lot of the community does have an issue with the police force. That's what I'm getting. They're saying, well, they're out to get us. They're not. I can tell them that and in certain cases, I've reached out to Peel Regional Police for a mutual client, and we've worked very well together. The compassion was there. They understood. Amazing. That's what we need. If we are able to bring that out, so they call me the Pied Piper of gang members, and that could be like a positive or a negative, right? But once we gain that trust and establish that relationship, which takes a long time with these individuals, and we say, no, you can absolutely, work with this person. You can absolutely work with this officer. And it kind of brings it back, because right now they have it in their minds that the police is just out to get them. And there's bad apples everywhere, and that's not the case. Because there are a lot of very caring, compassionate police officers who truly believe in our community.
Yeah, they truly do.
Yeah.
I'll let my colleague Len here. He'll probably have some questions for you too.
Mr. Carby.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak on this again, because I know Ms. DeBiase is being mindful of kind of the process of getting funding, but I think I would bring to the attention of this table how frustrating it can be for not-for-profit organizations to access funds, even when there are announcements made. So for example, one particular funding stream announced by the federal government back in 2022, which is now stalled because there is challenge of whether or not the region of Peel can sign a understanding to receive those funds. So the federal government has said, yes, funds are available. The region of Peel says, can we sign something beyond the time when our organization may not exist anymore? And so all of this money that the organizations such as theirs are waiting on gets stalled into a process over a year and a half, while members of our community are funding organizations such as these from their pockets. And I think there are enough people around this table and enough people involved in the political leadership of our community and in our country that we have to do better than this for our community. It's not good enough to say that we have to figure out the politics and the bureaucracy to be able to get funding down to organizations, while at the same time there is nothing happening. And so my appeal is that whoever is at this table might be able to assist the organization to access those funds, that we will do so, because we have to do better for our community.
Message well delivered, Len. It is an actual problem, this transition process, and can we extend your, and we are, all the mayors as we're looking at that in earnest. So if there's no other questions, Nellie, I just wanted to thank you. I want, very minor point, Nellie, I didn't want to say, but and maybe I misheard you, but when you came to the podium, one of the first things you said was, you know, I'm here today and it's my people or the people I deal with that relate to the crime that we're doing. And I'm sure what you meant was they do a percentage of it and not the crime. It was just a minor point that I picked up on.
Sorry, can you say that again? I'm sorry.
When you introduced yourself,
Yes.
and maybe I misheard you, but you'd heard the conversation from before, and you sort of introduced yourself just in an introductory way. You say, I'm here to talk about, because it's the group that I deal with that does this crime. And I'm sure what you meant was does some of this crime. That is to say, they do a percentage of it. You know what I'm trying to say? That's how I just factored it
Understood.
in. Because to be honest, our family members had a car stolen, and it wasn't a member of the black community. It was somebody that wasn't black. And I'm sure when they get to Montreal, there may be people with an ancestry like your last name and mine that may be involved there. So crime runs all, and I know you meant that, but I just wanted you to know that's how we took it, certainly.
Yes,
Absolutely.
And let me tell you, we know, they tell me too much that I don't even want to hear from them. So all that information of how it flows, where it goes, what's happening, they
But
tell me
I know what you meant to. They're a segment of the community amongst
segment.
many others, but more particularly the over-policing, et cetera. The second point that I wanted to make was, and nobody's used the phrase, but I will, that's why everything you say and everything everybody says now really comes down to community safety and well-being. That's what we're really talking about. One of the analogies, I'll give you a quick one. We've all been through it. When you were grade 4, 5, 6, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, you know, Joy said, I want to be an astronaut. Peggy said, I want to be a lawyer. Nobody ever said, oh, I want to be a prostitute, or I want to be a drug. Nobody ever said that. So they got off-boarded or on ramps somewhere and with disadvantages in life, and they ended up where they ended up. The final point I always make when I give this piece is, and you're not just saying it, and we shouldn't be doing it because it's the right thing to do, because it's the right thing to do.
That's right.
We're doing it because every dollar you spend at that front end saves you $6 around this table. And so it's the right thing to do, but community safety and well-being is where our salvation will come, because you can off-ramp those kids at a young age from all societies and all cultures that just didn't get the right help, mentorship, whatever the case might be that others were blessed with.
Correct.
And if so, they'd be sitting around this table with us or some other thing that they'd be doing and not left to their own devices. So that's really the message we take, and we're grateful for the work you do. And the chair may be following up as well with you personally about, because I agree with Mayor Crombie. I call people like you multipliers, that the little bit of money we do, we give you $1, you give us $1,000 of work back, and we have to keep promoting folks like you. So thank you very, very much for the work you do. Mr. Carby's moved receipt and the mayor seconded receipt of your delegation. That is carried. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us on to our next delegation, 2.2, Peel Crime Stoppers. Deputation request received from Mr. Imran Hassan, a friend of this board, Chair, regarding an update on the ongoing work of Peel Crime Stoppers program. Imran, welcome, and you have 5 minutes.
Our directors, Mayor Crombie, Mayor Brown, and our distinguished guests. We've had a detailed conversation in depth about automobile theft. And I just wanted to share a personal anecdote that I got involved in Crime Stoppers because I had my car stolen. And that happened 3 years ago, right from my driveway. long before this became a, epidemic. And I realized that while the police are doing an incredible job, the service, the frontline members, they can't do the job alone. They need help. And so I volunteered with Crime Stoppers, and subsequently I'm here today as the chair. And I wanted to bring some information forward about the work that Crime Stoppers has been doing with the support of the Peel Police Services Board, our Peel Police Service, as well as our members and the association who is also here with us today. So thank you again for this opportunity to present. My name is Imran Hassan. I'm the chair for Peel Crime Stoppers. To the right of me is Harry Pedwell, my vice chair, and we bring greetings on behalf of the board of Peel Crime Stoppers. Who are we? A community-led volunteer organization. We work in collaboration with the police, the public, and the media. We're focused on, formerly the chair mentioned, community safety and well-being. And we have a unique program. We have an anonymous tip line. We have a tool that helps protect the public and build resilience in the community. Know that when the public calls Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS, you never have to testify in court. You always remain anonymous. We never know who the caller is. In fact, if the caller subsequently implicates themselves by saying they're the next door neighbor and the crime is being committed in their community, we go to the extent of removing that piece of information from the tip before it's handed over to the appropriate law enforcement agency. And that's how we ensure anonymity.
I'd also like to add it's 100% a volunteer organization. We have a volunteer board of approximately 10 people, and we have between 50 and 100 volunteers, depending on the time, representing all different groups within Peel Region.
So here we are again to talk about auto theft, one of the many crimes that we help prevent and help solve, along with other crimes that are listed and the statistics. For your reference, I won't go through them all, but you can see that we have received thousands of tips, which has led to thousands of arrests, as well as property that's been recovered, and of course, drugs and other cash that's been recovered from proceeds of crime. And so this is just an illustration of how Crime Stoppers is involved in helping protect the community and provide that additional layer of safety and protection. So we had a conversation earlier. In fact, my friend, the CAO of the PRPA, we were just chatting about how the police can't do what they do alone. They rely on collaboration, and in that ecosystem of crime prevention and then helping solve crimes, Crime Stoppers plays an integral role. We're out in the community. We're not only working with Peel Police, but we're also working with our fire, paramedics, and other security agencies who operate here in Peel. We go out into the community. We organize different initiatives, always with a theme. For example, we have an annual car show. I think, Al, you'll remember coming out to that and supporting it. Thank you very much. And we're promoting road safety and school zone safety. Other times, most recently, we just held a document shredding drive-through, and that was aimed at fraud prevention. We want to let the public know they need to destroy their unused or unwanted confidential and sensitive documents securely, so no one steals their identity and commits fraud. We've also organized a game show quiz, a little more interactive and fun initiative where we deliver safety tips to seniors, and that happened at Square One. And there's a image there of our police, fire, and paramedics on stage, answering questions for the seniors. And again, providing safety tips and building resilience within that community. And more recently, we partnered with the Women's Trucking Federation in wrapping trucks, tractor-trailer trucks, with a message of human trafficking. And that was done in partnership with Walmart. They did 5 trucks, and now those trucks are driving up and down the 401 and across the Trans-Canada Highway to let people know the signs of human trafficking. And so these are just some of the initiatives that we've taken to help build resilience in the community and provide those additional safety tips and protection for the public. So our ask today, and I know that there was a question of funding earlier, and I'll just go on the record of saying that we don't receive any sustainable funding for any governments or any other entities. We go out into the community and we fundraise. And so we need stable funding to be able to continue the work that we're doing here in working with our first responders. And we're looking for that opportunity to co-brand our message of Crime Stoppers. We have a postcard that we publish, but I know that there's lots of literature that the Peel Police publishes in the form of safety cards, and of course your vehicles, maybe the police tape, and other areas, whether it's business cards or other areas where we can get that message of Crime Stoppers across. And we have a current MOU that's been exchanged, and we need to obviously finalize that. And so that's kind of where we're at the moment. Harry, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I just like to add, so Peel Crime Stoppers is very unique in that we're the only organization that a member of the public can approach anonymously and provide a tip to the police force. So it certainly it serves a very underserved area of individuals, particularly from the immigrant base, who are afraid to approach police because of past experience in their own countries and so on, or individuals who are afraid of repercussions if they would go directly to the police force. So we're that outlet for that audience within Peel Region, and we've been doing a fairly good job for a long time doing that. And I think our major ask here is getting some stable funding, and more particularly also is that co-branding, making sure that both OPP and Peel Regional Police on their business cards, they have our thing there, our information in case they want to make anonymous tips come in on their vehicles, etc. And that's something for the board to keep in mind when they're having programs, that they're conscious that there are other organizations out there supporting your endeavors, that we want to make sure that are represented within the police forces as well. Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much to both of you for coming in today and the updates, and the fact that you're volunteer organizations, the board's volunteer and everyone else, and yet you give your time to such an important such an important requirement in our community. So thank you for all the work that you do and for the presentation today. I think your statistics were very enlightening as well for the amount of tips that you guys get and are followed up on. So thank you for that. I know there are some questions on the board, so I'm going to first go to our board director, Al Boughton, for a question.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thanks so much for the presentation, and I did attend the car show, as I have since you've run it. Terrific event, happy to support it. As a bit of a positive side effect of what you do is when I moved from H section back 100 years ago to the M section, they were all brand new homes. When Crime Stoppers comes into the neighborhood, it gives all these people who've come from all over the world, the province, the city, nobody knows each other when they go in. Crime Stoppers became the common denominator in our new neighborhood, and you get to go out and meet your neighbors because we all want to be safe in our neighborhood, and we want to keep eyeballs on everybody else's home. We got to know everybody. Probably that end section was the safest neighborhood that I've ever been in my life. It was incredible, and Crime Stoppers was a big part of that. We got to know neighbors, we got to make friends, we keep our eyes on other people's homes and when things are going wrong. So that's just a little ancillary benefit of Crime Stoppers. You do great work. Thanks for the presentation today, and you know that I'll always be there to support you, as will the rest of the board.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Director Amaratia.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan, for coming today. I have two questions. You had a slide with a table about how your tips translate into outcomes for policing. I'm curious, how do you measure that? How are you able to tie a tip you receive and share with Peel Police to actual outcomes?
So Crime Stoppers does take the tips in, and as board members, we're not privy to the information as it's received. Once that tip comes in, it's then scrubbed with any information that needs to be removed before then it's handed over to our law enforcement partners. At that point, Peel Regional Police here would have information that would better answer the question that you're asking. Unfortunately, I don't have the opportunity to comment on that. If there's someone from our leadership who would like to chime in, I would invite that up.
Mr. T, I think maybe Nick could just speak to that other half of it for us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chief, and through the Vice Chair. So essentially what happens once the information is collected, it's distributed to the relevant section of the police service. Based on the nature of the information, they would then take it and investigations initiated. And if it results in arrests, seizures, those types of things, that's then reported back. And as you can see from those numbers, it's particularly, my area, I know policing operations relies on it heavily, but really, really valued partnership when we're investigating things like drugs, guns and gangs, and all kinds of different things. So I appreciate that.
Is there an actual agreement between the two organizations? Because this is data that you're sharing across, or?
An agreement in terms of?
I mean, they're giving you tips, you're passing back, outcomes on those tips. Is there an MOU of some sort? Or
perhaps maybe Sharon can speak to it. On a national basis, it's protected by the courts, in fact, but maybe Sharon can speak to the logistical part.
So we do have an MOU, but it's also, as the chief alluded to, it's governed by confidential informant privilege. So we have very specific rules as to how it is disseminated, how it's kept, and that we have directives as to how to deal with that. So it's governed by both policy and by agreement.
Okay. My second question is, I can imagine as residents call, there's a lot of very legitimate tips, but then there are tips that you filter. I assume there are tips that come in that have a particular bias. One issue that as a board and police we've been dealing with these issues, and so my question to you is, for tips coming in that are biased, how are your folks trained to identify that bias? We had a government at some point who almost was encouraging or exploring a federal policy about snitch lines that targeted certain communities. So that and I imagine, people use these platforms to do things like that. So how are you trained? How are your people trained to identify that bias?
Thank you for the question. Because the program provides that anonymity, because it provides informer privilege, I think it does encourage and provide that level of courage for those individuals who want to report crimes, hate crimes, that are race related, and really this is the whole benefit of reporting through Crime Stoppers versus what the challenge that exists when you're calling a police service or any other organization that's collecting data. We're not collecting data. We're making sure that the information that you're giving to us. When I say us, I mean the call center, which is not the board itself, but an independent call center, separate from the 911 call center. They're not interested in knowing, age, demographics, or race, or any other details other than the crime that's being committed or any suspicious or illegal activity that's being conducted in your neighborhood. I hope I've answered that question.
Sorry, I'm going to just turn it over to Deputy Debat. I know you wanted to add something to that.
Thank you, and through the chair, good morning, Mr. Atia. The actual Crime Stoppers program, the intake of the information that comes in anonymously is managed by our office in community safety and well-being. It's staffed by sworn officers and it's overseen by supervisors. So to answer your question, when it comes to the tips that come in, and to protect the informant privilege or the anonymity of it, it's all screened and filtered to when it's disseminated to areas like under Deputy Milanovich's area or Deputy Andrews's area. From that, they will filter and screen the validity of what the tip is, and it's all encompassing of what the crime is or what the incident is, and the validity of even whether or not there's any basis to what that tip might be.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Are you okay? You're done. Perfect. Thank you. Now turning it over to Board Director Len Carby.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sand, for your report today. I often say to you, you're one of probably the hardest working volunteers out there. You're everywhere, sharing the news of Crime Stoppers and what you're doing. So thank you for all that you do there. And maybe this is a little bit of my ignorance here. So I want us to zero a little bit on your specific asks. There is a element about co-branding and what opportunities there are for that to happen more with Peel Police or with the board. Maybe you could zero in a little bit more on that and what we might do in response to your request around co-branding. And secondly, around the memorandum of understanding, there's some reference to that earlier, and what's holding that from happening. My goal is always for us to find solutions, and so that we're not just talking about something that exists, but we're not moving towards finding the answer to it. So maybe you could lean into those specific asks a little bit more for me.
Actually, I'll take that one. So we have 3 asks that we have listed up there. One sort of saying this is something we're looking for, which is stable funding as a nonprofit. Co-branding is important to us because we want to ensure that our message is included out there with the police message. And it's as simple as things like ensuring that when business cards are made up, it's co-branded with Crime Stoppers, simply because when an officer is handing a business card to somebody, they may not be comfortable talking to that person, but if they got Crime Stoppers and know they can make an anonymous tip, that's another avenue for them to do so. Having Crime Stoppers logos on police vehicles and other potential community engagement and advertising type things, that would also be ideal for us because, again, it assists us and provides the police with more opportunity to get those tips that they wouldn't otherwise get. So from our perspective, it's just more making sure that the board is aware of that aspect when they're considering projects that are going on. And the last one with the MOU. So we have an MOU in place. The next one, an update to that is in process with Peel Regional Police, and I think they're going to be presenting that to you shortly. It was just more for your awareness.
Great, thank you so much.
Perfect, thank you so much. Can I have somebody to receive the report? Perfect, Al Boughton, Len Carby the second. Thank you so much to both of you for coming today.
Thank you for having us.
All right, moving to the new business. And the first item is police reported crime statistics in Canada 2022. And Chief, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, but I believe Charles will be speaking to it.
Thank you, Chief. Through you, Chair. Sorry. Today we will be presenting the reports from Statistic Canada on Uniform Crime Reporting Survey and some of the findings related to our region. It's not surprising the results of the Crime Severity Index. This year, for the second consecutive year, we've seen an increase of the Crime Severity Index in Canada. We've seen an increase of 4%. In our region, we've seen an increase of 24.8%. This increase is directly related to 2022 numbers of vehicle theft and an increase in homicide. That being said, I think it's very important to note that we are still well below the national average and the provincial crime severity index. We are still one of the safest community with a population of over 1 million. One of the other data point that is important to mention is the appeal weighted clearance rate. The weighted clearance rate is a portion of criminal incidents solved by police. In Peel, we have a weighted clear rate of 38.7. We are higher than the national rate, a little bit below the Ontario, but we still are the highest weighted clearance rate amongst municipality over 1 million population. Across the country, the Canadian Violent Crime Severity Index rose 5% in 2022. Our Violent Crime Severity Index increased by 33.5% from 2021, specifically due to the number of homicides and robberies. Once again, Peel's Violent Crime Severity Index at 65.9 is well below the Canadian average. For our nonviolent crime severity index, it rose to 4% in 2022. It's directly related to the number of vehicle theft we've seen in the region, and it's aligned with what we see across the country. It is important to note that the nonviolent crime severity index in our region is the largest increase in comparison of other agencies, and that the main driver, as mentioned, is the number of auto theft and an increase in break and enters. When we look across Canada, the nonviolent crime severity index is at 70.9, and in Ontario, 51.3. In Peel, we are at 37.0. Despite an increase in some of our, in the violent and nonviolent, Peel region is still one of the safest community with above 1 million population.
Thank you, Charles. And I think, the highlights of this continue to be that violent crime and property crimes, as they're mapped and weighted nationally, for any municipality over 1 million, we are still on the overall rating, the lowest. It really doesn't speak to the issues that plague our communities, because you've heard me say sometimes 70 to 80% of the time we spend is on non-criminal activity. But when it does come to crime severity, we continue to see our rates well below other large municipalities. The demand you'll see from property crimes is still very significant, and as the population grows, we watch carefully how that impacts the rates here. But I do want to highlight that, and we've done it before, and Mayor Crombie, I know you've said it before, is our people do a remarkable job of resolving, investigating crimes. It may not speak to how quick the phone call is answered or how quick we're at a doorstep, but the investigations are resolved because of the skill sets of our women and men here at Peel, and I just want to ensure that we give them the credit for that work. But just my commentary on the report.
Thank you so much for the update. I did have two questions I wanted to ask, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Crombie. Just one is, I saw the Violent Crime Severity Index. So 2021, going into 2022 is obviously, we're coming out of COVID as well. So I think the other thing I remember from a past update is not enough reporting was also happening. So would you say those are two big contributing factors to the big jump?
That is the trend nationally for almost
Yeah.
every municipality.
Perfect. Thank you. Turning it over to Bonnie Crombie. Mayor Crombie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Madam Acting Chair. So it was on, and I think you explained it, Charles, but I was looking at the severity rate and also the violent crime severity rate, which was, while we were performing very well, there was seemed to be a big increase. And so the jump was 25 and 20% or whatever. And you're attributing that to some homicides? Is that what it was? It was isolated or?
Through you, Chair, that's correct. My mayor would like to bring in 2022, and Deputy Chief Milanovic can certainly add on to it. We've seen a total of 30 homicides versus in 2021, 14 homicides. The way the calculation is done for the crime severity index is it takes into consideration the type of crime, the severity, and the occurrences of crimes. So for sure, when we look at a homicide that, especially the 16 homicides more in a year, it will create that a significant increase in the percentage.
Okay, yeah, the number itself wasn't large, but the percent increase was. So I knew there'd be a reason, and I guess that's it. And on the clearance rate, which we have some higher clearing rates in our province. Do we know who they are? So you've got Canada at 55, slightly lower than Ontario at 60, and Peel's at 58.69, which is higher than the national rate, but lower than the provincial rate and higher than other agencies being compared.
Yes, my mayor, if you look in the report, right at page 7, you will see the other jurisdictions. It's important to note that we compare ourselves with other jurisdictions that have over 1 million population. Peel at 24.55 weighted clearance rates for nonviolence and at 58.69 for violent. First chart, you will see that right after it's Toronto. And for the nonviolence, we are between Ottawa and Calgary. You have the list of all the jurisdictions that we proceed with a calculation comparison.
Thank you. And we had spoken earlier about car thefts. Are they tracked in this index somewhere as well? And what about home invasions? That would be a violent crime. And break and enters, would that be violent or a property crime?
The break and enter is calculated as a non-violent crime. If it is considered a robbery when their use of violence, it will be calculated in the violent crime severity index.
And then the car theft, is that reflected here?
The car theft being a same concept, since it is a property crime, it will, if there is use of violence, it is now a carjacking robbery. It will be calculated in the violent crime.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. Next, Amadatia.
Thank you for the report, Charles. The higher clearance rate on violent crimes clearly, provides public confidence in Peel Police. We clearly have strong investigative teams. We've seen that. We've toured it. We see the numbers. I'm curious on the non-violent crimes and the lower clearance rates. I'm concerned about maybe the message, or the message it sends to residents of Peel. How should this be interpreted by the residents of Peel? Do we have less resources to deal with nonviolent crimes? What do we need to do to improve this rate? That's my first question.
Thank you for the question, and through the vice chair. Yeah, the reality is based on the type of crime or the severity of that crime, we're going to contribute more resources to it. And a great example of that would be our homicides. Tremendous amount of money, time, and effort and resources invested in those because they are the most serious crime that we can investigate and as a service respond to. Certainly resourcing oriented towards some of the lesser crimes, property crimes, is important as well. And we've demonstrated that with, for example, our commercial auto crime unit. We continue to funnel resources into what could be considered a property crime. But the reality is it's a priority for our community. So I don't find it surprising. I can tell you traditionally, you will find some of the lesser property crimes without suspects having lower solvency rates. And the more serious the crime becomes in terms of where it sits in a criminal code or the community, you can expect those rates to rise because, our resources are finite and we have to organize them in a way commensurate to the prioritization of it.
And so when it comes to other regions, Edmonton, York, and Ottawa, who are higher than us, is it just a matter of them pumping resources into those areas, or, why are they better than us? We're supposed to be the best at it. We're supposed to be the best at everything.
Well, I do think, just to highlight what Nick said, is that we have a finite number of resources.
Yeah.
And this is a direct correlation to our ability to deal with. It would be my ideal to not only just be great at the violent crime and the high profile ones, but to also address the quality of life issues, which I think all of us here are, we'd like to do better in that space. So I guess, not to acknowledge any other police agency, but we do know that those spaces are ones where we'd like to get better at. I think we've all heard the delays in our response to mischiefs or disturbances and not hearing somebody, officer come in. These are the ones that I know the board is quite supportive of me working towards, but it gives us a goal.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. On the theft and vandalism, which are most likely non-violent crimes, do we have data to distinguish between businesses versus residential and where we're stronger?
I don't think it's listed within the report that is provided to us. Internally, we do have data that distinguishes between commercial and residential, not only in terms of vandalism, but also we've broken it out now into key areas within the community safety and well-being plan, for example, places of worship. And so we're able to distinguish with that, but it's not contained within the report that's provided to us from the StatScan.
And in addition to that, Mr. Tia, we know that Peel has, I think Charles mentioned it, a significant percentage of increase in overall crime reported, which, obviously plays the disproportionality of our ability to address some of the lesser ones, right? So we're seeing an increase overall, but the percentage of solvency and the weighted clearance are the ones that we're looking at.
And my last question, do you think there's a correlation? We talked about resources, but do you think there's a correlation between our service model and our numbers and our ability, our clearance rates? And do we need to look at our service model again to see how that can be improved to improve our clearance rates?
I believe there's absolutely a correlation between how you deploy or your model and, the outcomes. And you've heard me say the pop to cop ratio, even though isn't a great one, because it doesn't tell you how you're using your people. We do believe that, and hence why you've seen some of the formative adjustments, like the alternative response units, the special constables, the divisional mobilization teams, trying to mitigate them before, because obviously it's not throwing constant numbers of bodies at the problem. It's we're trying to get upstream in different ways. And so, and there's even technological solutions we're looking at to increase the ability to take on the reports and respond to them. A heartbeat doesn't mean that we're going to get to every crime or resolve it, but it requires sort of a multidisciplinary approach. So to answer your question, the service delivery model has to be revisited continuously, which we do when we see the pressure points. We pick and see what other organizations are doing, but we try to just make it unique to our own service as well.
Any more questions? Good, perfect. Thank you so much, Charles, for the update and very well laid out. Thank you. Can I have someone to receive the, thank you, Ahmed, followed by Len Garvey for a second. Thank you so much. Moving to the next item, the 2021 Equal Opportunity Report. Chief, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure, Deputy DePatt, please.
Thank you.
Good morning, and through the chair, I've invited Inspector Andrew Cooper, who authored the report, to provide some highlights. It's actually the 2022 report.
Good morning, all, and through the chair, I'm just going to highlight some of the accomplishments of the recruiting and staff support members. With respect to the accomplishment, I'm sorry, next slide, please. With respect to the accomplishments that you see on the board there, recruitment and staff support members continue to attract and retain skilled professionals to represent our community. With respect to data, I'm going to go over some data results with respect to 2022. With respect to the positive recruitment trends, I'll also highlight some of those as well. One of the pieces that I'd like to highlight is, first and foremost, is that with respect to some of our outreach programs and our outreach members within our unit, they've undertaken an aggressive strategy to attract skilled professionals with respect to recruiting and so forth. With respect to our FIT team, the female inclusion team, we continue to attract and retain skilled female applicants. Our members continue to establish meaningful connections through mentorship and support through recruiting processes. In 2022, out of 52, 17 were hired, 1 for cadet and 1 for the auxiliary bureau. Next slide, please. With respect to the 2022 new applicants, as you can see, with respect to some of our numbers, there was 75.9% with respect to racialized applicants, 22.4% with respect to female applicants, which was a slight increase in 2022. People with disabilities was 2.6%, as you can see, and with respect to Indigenous individuals, it was 1.9%, which was just a slight decrease with respect to that piece there. That again, with respect to the slight drop in applicants, these numbers were consistent with the numbers just prior to the pandemic. For instance, in 2022, there's 1,863, which was consistent to the numbers prior to the pandemic. Nevertheless, there appears to be no shortage of applicants, given that less than 7% are successful in the hiring process. Next slide, please. As you can see here with our numbers, racialized persons is 61.6%, females 31.2%, and Indigenous 4%. So based on the total of 125 officers that were hired in 2022, this was an increase from the previous year of 118. For instance, 39 female officers hired, 77 racialized officers were hired, and 5 Indigenous officers were hired. The new figures demonstrate the continued success of recruiting initiatives undertaken by the organization and the recruiting and staff support members. May I note that with respect to our female hires, which accounts for less than 1/4 of the applicant pool, which is 22.4%, they comprise of over 30% of the persons hired. Next slide, please. And with respect to our civilian members, like you see, quite healthy numbers there in terms of the categories indicated on the board. Racialized persons at 65.5%, females 63.8%, persons with disabilities 1.1%, as you can see at the bottom there, Indigenous with 2.3%. Next slide, please. And with respect to the auxiliary and COPS program, can I stress that these are extremely important avenues for us with respect to individuals moving on to be recruit constables. I'd also like to, again, the cadet program, which is extremely valuable and provides assistance to all our bureaus, which allows them to become familiar members within the policing cultures to become police cadets for the recruit constable position. Again, the auxiliary unit is also extremely impactful and provides opportunities for the recruit process moving forward. As you can see there with the numbers in 2022, there's 17 cadets that were promoted to the recruit constable. 7 cadets were racialized, which is 41.2% of that. 7 cadets was 41.2 for females. And we had actually 12 auxiliary members that were successful in achieving the recruit constable positions. So overall, this was quite successful. Next slide. And I'd just like to thank you with respect to those few highlights there. Again, I'd just like to re-emphasize just the efforts of the recruit and support staff who worked diligently throughout the year, accomplishing our task with respect to attaining those skilled officers.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the board? Okay, excellent. So just from my end, this is oh no, the question just popped up. So Al Boughton, please.
Thank you for the report. One, just throw in Vice Chair Coley and myself attended the Youth and Police Initiative graduation, and 40 there that day, I think roughly 40 there that day, when they talked about the aspirations of these kids. And they're all 15 and I think 16 or 17 maybe on the outside, but mostly 15 and 16. The beauty of that was 33 of those 40, and they talked about their plans in the future. 33 of those 40 had indicated that they wanted to join, not just police, but they wanted to join PRP, and many of them on the civilian end, not just, they want to be a copper and be uniformed and do that, but 33 of those 40 was an incredible program, and I think that'll be a fabulous source for new applicants going forward, representative of the community as a certainty. That work that's being done there, and I hope that those 33, go back to school and they tell 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 of their friends, boy, was this a great experience, and we continue to open that door for new recruits from our community to support the work that you're doing. So I wanted to say that earlier, but Vice Chair Coley was with me that day. It was heartwarming to see that these kids now are thinking of a great career at PRP or in a police service. So thank you so much for the report. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amaratia?
Thank you. Just a few questions. First of all, congratulations. We see improvement year over year. And that's, I look forward to the day where we no longer talk about racialized recruitment and it just becomes a norm. But my first question, you in the report, it talks about a number of channels that you use to attract new recruits. Which ones prove more successful when it comes to racialized communities?
With respect to racialized communities, I feel that what we've been doing in the past and currently is that we're interacting with those communities, and we're having meaningful conversations with respect to our profession. We found that in the past that there was a lot of misconceptions with respect to the requirements needed to become an applicant. So I think, in essence, with respect to our forums, our online media pieces that we have put out there, we've reached those communities who perhaps didn't have the information that we have now. And again, coupled with our members actively in the community, communicating and identifying pieces that perhaps could allow them to be successful candidates. So I'm going to say overall, with respect to our success, is the fact that our communication piece has certainly expanded as a result.
Okay. It sounds to me like being in the community, your team going out there, as part of events, as part of, I guess, places of worship and, where communities gather, that's really what changing the dial here. That's good. I mean, I've seen it, so I'm happy to hear that. Are there any challenges that you're experiencing when it comes to retaining racialized recruited members once they join Peel Police? You know, are there challenges that they face? Are we seeing any retention issues?
With respect to your question, I don't think it's overt. I don't think it's at the point where we're at a critical stage. I know that based on discussions with my colleagues across the country, I know it varies with respect to our different police organizations. However, I haven't seen a disparaging amount of individuals leaving with respect to, you know, regardless of the category of officer. I know that, and it's already been brought forward today with respect to the region being expensive, and sometimes individuals look out for other areas which are a little bit more compatible with respect to financial reasons. But in essence, I haven't seen anything that would allow me to feel that we're at a critical stage with respect to people leaving and so forth.
Okay, and my last question. Keeping in mind the demographics of Peel and, you know, the major communities we have in the region, are there any particular communities that we still do not see members or individuals from those communities applying and joining the service?
The question would be, no, I haven't seen anything that would suggest that you know, individuals from different communities are not applying. Yes, I mean, we can always improve with respect to certain specific communities, which we're actively working on. But with respect to one particular community, it hasn't come to mind. Again, we've, with respect to the individuals that that are successful, I know that the report indicates that there's over 65 languages with respect to over 1,000 officers that that have entered our organization. So on that scope, you can, as you can see, once you read the report, that we've covered quite the scope with respect to attracting members from different cultures and communities and so forth. So I think we've done a very good job as a result of that.
So just final comment, it would be useful, and I say this with caution because I don't want to present data that might stigmatize certain communities, or, but it would be useful to kind of break out this category of racialized and begin to understand what it looks like more specifically by certain criteria or certain communities in future years in this report. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to turn over to Deputy DePatt. I know you wanted to add a comment.
Thank you, and through the chair, I just wanted to add, commend Inspector Cooper because he is presenting the equal opportunity report, but he's since transferred, so I want to thank him for his time in there. His team has done an incredible amount of work, and it's important to highlight this because the pool of candidates that we are trying to attract, we insist that they be the best in class anywhere. The reality is we're competing against other police services in the GTA and inclusive of our partners in the Ontario Provincial Police. So attracting quality candidates is a significant task that the outreach teams have been performing. If you look at the report, of the 1,863 total applicants for uniform positions, what is worthy of noting is that 75.9% of them identified as being racialized. So when we are out in the community, when we are engaging with our in different venues to highlight that Peel Regional Police is the place to apply, that this is the best police services to have a meaningful career and make impact in the community, it goes with a lot of effort to not only invest locally, but outside as well, because we are competing in the same pools. That's why the cadet program is so important, because if you see in the report, over 50% of our cadet complement were hired as constables, and we really look at the cadet program as almost like a farm team. so that, and it prevents them, or at least mitigates them from going to other police services. On top of that, I will highlight that we've hired the 70 new sworn officers that the board approved for 2023, on top of the other officers that we hire through attrition. And I will note and highlight that 50 new officers will be graduating from our post-Ontario Police College program next week, and will be deploying to the front lines as of then. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy DePatt. Turning it over to Len Carby.
Thank you, Inspector, for the report. The report shares a very positive story that there is large pool of applicants, and that's a good problem to have. The flip side of that, though, with only a 7% success rate with individuals who have applied to those who actually make it through the process, is there any concern that there is maybe some measure of fatigue in the community around, I'm not going to get through, with such a small success rate, it seems, of those who apply to who are actually hired, that there is concern that we could potentially see a fall off in interest based on the level of success in getting through to being hired?
Yeah, that just kind of coincides with our forums and the fact of the matter that we're out there in the community just explaining the different stages with respect to the process. As you can understand, with respect to that 7%, it's extremely competitive. And again, just to stress that we seek the most skilled with respect to this profession. So in answer to your question, because of our information sessions, our expectations with respect to what is expected is definitely out there. So for individuals, for the majority of the individuals who enter this particular process, understand what is required and what the level is. And I think with respect to that knowledge piece, assists us with the applicants, knowing that, this is extremely competitive and I really need to put my best foot forward to be considered.
And are you getting a high percentage of repeat applicants through the process? So not successful in year one, but reattempt the following season, or do this just walk away?
Oh no, for individuals who are really steadfast with their convictions with respect to becoming a police officer, you will see them 2, 3, 4 times doing what they need to do to be successful. So with respect to that answer, yes, we do see them at times, but again, if they're not successful, they understand what needs to be done the next time around.
Great. I think that's really encouraging to know that there are, so many members in our community who are still interested in actually being part of our service and are, staying the course with walking through the very high standards that we have. So thank you for your work there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and a great report. I do want to do a big shout out to the recruitment team. I've been at many community events where they've had a table, they've been recruiting. I've seen the turnout, the questions that get asked. I've actually seen people starting applications at a desk. That's how much I'm really excited to see the number of women. It's increasing of who want to join our force, which is fantastic. And I do want to say, you guys do an incredible job on social media as well. And I'll say that because I get asked all the time, how do I find out when the recruitment session's out, when are they doing it? They post all the time of different sessions that they're doing for different types of sessions that they're doing and they're offering. So if you are interested and you're watching this, I would really highly recommend you follow that because they do share that. And I really want to say thank you to you and Deputy DePatt for the update today. Perfect. And now?
Thank you.
Oh, yes, I do need to move this report. I apologize, Al, and thank you to Ahmed. And now moving to the next item, Human Rights Report and 2022 Use of Force Report. The Chief.
Thank you, and through the chair, if the board will recall, not too long ago, this report was a product that was reported on through our corporate development area, and that was by way of ensuring that we met our obligations under the legislation. Throughout the years, the Human Rights Project initiative has had impact on how we look at gathering data, race and identity-based data collection, and then how we report it, hence why the report before you is entitled Commitment to Action. Today, Staff Superintendent Dirk Niles, Dr. Akwasi Owusu-Bempah, and I'd be remiss not to mention PhD candidate Alex Lescombe is here today to present to you our findings. Thank you. Over to you, Dirk.
Thanks, Deputy. Good afternoon, Board, and through you, Chair. Very pleased to be back here again with the Professor to talk to you about our inaugural report this year in relation to the Human Rights Project. So what we chose to do this year was actually bring forward, upon the release of the recommendations in June of this year, a Human Rights Project report, and include, as the sixth principle of the Ontario Human Rights Project, the data, and include use of force data, and then do our race-based data analysis throughout that. So the report is entitled Committed to Action, and it's going to serve as a progress report where we want to hold ourselves accountable on an annual basis for the community to highlight our commitment to making the changes necessary in our transformational work on the Ontario Human Rights Project. One of the most important aspects of our work to date has been the inclusion of our Anti-Racism Advisory Committee. We have been working with them for the last 2 years to listen and learn on how we can operationalize the elements of the recommendations and have them fuse with our service delivery model. This has been challenging. There's been several calls over the years that there's been delays in releasing our progress, and we want to reassure the public that part of that delay process was to make sure that we could get this right. And with us throughout this journey has been one of our leading academics, Professor Akwasi Owusu-Bempah, supported by this year his PhD candidate, Mr. Alex Lescombe, who took care of all of the data analysis and then was verified by Akwasi. We also have Professor Lauren Foster and Les Jacobs, who have been a part of that journey with us as well. Could I get the next slide, please? So as everyone is aware, we started with the 7 principles of acknowledgement, engagement, policy guidance, monitoring and accountability, organizational change, and data collection. It's been very difficult, though, for us to convert several of the elements of the actual theoretical components and the philosophical components of the actual project into operational strategy. But what I am pleased to report to the board and to the public is that we have moved from discussing in past presentations elements of the project that were rooted in what we want to do, what we're going to experiment with, and we've now embedded this as part of our operational strategy within the service. I'm going to pause there. And Kwasi, was there something that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think turning the microphone on would help, but all of that to say no, I think you've captured it, Dirk.
Okay, thank you. Could I get the next slide, please, Daphne? So, as I had mentioned, we've discussed some of these elements in the past, and I'm just going to highlight how we've embedded all of these aspects and how these have synergized into what you'll see later in the presentation, which will be some of the findings that we've seen year over year. So in relation to body-worn cameras, we've now had a full acceptance and rollout through our membership, and it's now part of how our officers do their service delivery model. You just recently heard about our improved hiring practices and how this has now been solidified. Coupled with that is our psychological testing. We still have the most stringent psychological testing in all of Ontario and North America. And one of the key elements of what we include in our psychological testing is a test that we've spoken about in the past called the Matrix Predictive Uniform Law Enforcement Survey. And this measures 18 different liability scales, but one of the most important elements that it measures is a candidate's propensity to engage in racial misconduct, excessive use of force, sexual misconduct, criminal activity, and general disrespect. When we combine all of those psychological testings with the other stringent measures that we have that you heard about from Inspector Cooper, we are getting a full candidate reflective of our community, and all of our candidates have post-secondary education. Advanced mental health training is fully embedded. All frontline officers, as a result of the ACAMBA inquest that we've spoken about, have received this training, and with it, we've centered de-escalation. We have solidified the interactions with children training, which came out of the unpleasant situation we had, regrettably, where we handcuffed the 6-year-old black girl several years ago. And that training is now fully embedded through our communications department, as well as frontline, and all of our officers take a child in need of protection approach with regard to that. And we've recently added an autism awareness strategy, and the autism awareness strategy was a collaborative with Peel Autism for us to be able to give our officers the skills to deal with our autistic community. Again, all of this has been under the guidance from our Anti-Racism Advisory Committee and with constant feedback from our academics. Could I get the next slide there? I'm now going to turn over to our data framework approach, and I'm going to turn it over to the professor to speak about our accountability measures in this regard.
Thank you, Dirk, and thank you again for the opportunity to be here and address members of the board, the service, and the community. We've talked about this now, of course, several times, both at the board and the service level. The need for good data around policing generally, as the general crime statistics just alluded to, and race in particular is of utmost importance to advancing equitable, fair, and just treatment of members of the public in Peel Region as it is in other jurisdictions. And of course, this is precisely why the province has mandated the collection of and reporting on certain data elements. As some of the conversation, and it was actually, I think, very helpful for me to see, and I think for many of us to hear from members of the community and their perspectives, and the presentation earlier on with respect to the involvement of certain segments of the community in certain types of offenses, and certainly the overrepresentation in the justice system itself. And we see that clearly in different policing outcomes that are reported, such as in use of force. So the collection, analysis, and reporting of race-based data, as noted, is absolutely critical to ensuring, to the best extent possible, fair and equitable policing. But we can't just do this willy-nilly. And again, I'm repeating things that I've said in past years, but I think it's important that we continue to drive these points home. And so through the work that I've been doing with the service, and of course, as well with the engagements with the board, we continue to think through and devise and develop a plan to collect robust, high-quality data that can be reported to the public on race and outcomes in Peel Region and in the policing sector more generally. In order for us to do this, though, we need to have input, and looking at the chart or the flow in front of us in consultation with the community. Earlier this morning, I was giving a presentation to a group of healthcare practitioners, and there were grave concerns around even the collection of healthcare information disaggregated by race and what that means when it's made publicly available. And so as part of this process, of course, has been ongoing consultations with members of the public to gauge their perspectives on the collection of this data and importantly on its release. And then thinking about the collection itself. What is race? What is race as a concept, and how does one perceive another individual's race versus how they self-report their race? How do we best go about collecting that information? And then how do we then use that in order to conduct meaningful analyses and produce meaningful reports? And so a key part of the work that we've been doing over the past year is simply trying to better understand how to collect race-based data, the points at which within the sphere of policing in Peel Region, race-based data can be collected, of course, and again, I want to refer a little bit to the provincial level work that's being done because this has been informing broader initiatives. But better understanding the information that we have and that we can get in order for it to be analyzed and reported in a meaningful manner. And then importantly, contextualization. Again, part of the reason that I think the presentation we had earlier on was so powerful is because the person given the deputation acknowledged the overrepresentation potentially of certain segments of our community in certain types of offenses. And I think, I commend the chair for doubling down on that point that we don't want to stigmatize any community. We need to recognize that the vast majority of members of any given racial group are not involved in criminal activity, but we do have overrepresentation. And importantly, as we heard already, this can be driven, as we've discussed previously in this room, by factors internal to the police, whether that be at the policy and procedural level or at the decision-making level of individual officers, as well as by factors outside of policing that land in the realm of child welfare, in education, in employment, in housing, and in healthcare. And so this is part of the thinking and the information gathering we've been doing in order to move this strategy forward. And then, of course, there's the independent expert and analysis piece. I've come to learn that there are fantastic data scientists and quants, as I like to call them, within the service. But in order for data to be presented to the public in a way that is meaningful and a way that is going to garner accountability, a way that is going to be taken as genuine and trusted, it needs to be externally validated. And so this is part of course, what we've been doing and partnering with the service and Alex, and I'm glad you're getting the recognition you deserve because he's put a lot of hours into and collaborating with members in order to better understand the data, what is needed, and what can be done. So, you know, at its most basic here, data and data transparency can help foster accountability, but that can only be done that can only be achieved if it's done in a sensible and a sound manner, and that needs to be done in partnership with communities, as has been the case here, and as well as with external validation. You weren't expecting quite so much from me on that slide, were you, Dirk?
No, I'm fine with that. I was going to say, I was going to make a joke about there was a lot of bald guys working on some data analysis on our team as well. But Davni, can we get the next slide, please? So the next section of this is actually the point that we want to illustrate the findings that have come out of our work to date. And taking into account that we have looked at the data as a way to hold ourselves accountable year over year to see what we would find. And as I had illustrated earlier, we started with some theoretical. In 2020, we actually said that the combination of human rights focused training, which we've now completed 25,000 hours of, and the combination with body-worn cameras was paramount in making a shift to improve outcomes. In 2020, we had predicted that you would see up to 50%. That was actually on literature provided by the professor in terms of outcomes for community. And as I get into this, I want to provide some context. We just heard from Charles about crime severity and what's happening in the region, but it's important to note when we present this information, we're quite often asked, are your officers depolicing? Are your officers not responding to calls? Are your officers reducing their work effort? And the answer to that in Peel is no. In 2021, we had 23,351 custody events. In 2021, we had 22,251. And in 2022, which is the basis of this data, we had 25,700 custody events. So our officers are increasing their performance in response to some of the increases we've seen across the region post-COVID. So these numbers are actually that much more impactful when we look at it in that context. So I'll start with the first number there, which is the 275,000 events. As Deputy O'Doherty mentioned earlier, there's many calls that come into the 911 center. We classify an event as any situation that results in a call for service where an officer is going out and interacting with the public. That includes traffic stops and officer-generated contacts that result in a call for service. From an event, we can have a use of force incident. And from a use of force incident, an officer is mandated under the provincial legislation to submit a use of force report. Like previous years, 3/4 of our use of force is frontline focused, 75%, again, speaking to why our front-end stringent methods on psychological testing are so important when combined with our training. And what we notice now, this is our second year, we've had an 18.5% decrease in all use of force reports when compared to the inception of the Human Rights Project. We've had a 48% decrease in all types of force since the Human Rights Project began. So let me give you a little context on that. That works out to 1,000 less applications of force prior to the Human Rights Project. So we measure in types of force, we measure all of the different elements of force that a member can use. And when we looked at it in 2019, we had 2,099 types of force applied, and we are now down to 1,099 in 2022 data. And within that, we saw a 66% decrease in hard and soft physical control. We also noted a 48% decrease in the pointing and drawing of a firearm, a 97% decrease in discharging of a firearm. That accounts to 1 discharge, which was accidental and nobody was injured, and a 32% total decrease in discharging of a taser. And I'll pause there if you wanted to comment on that. At all? No? Okay. Could we go to the next slide? We also measured, like in previous year, reasons for use of force applications and what is happening in our decision-making process for our members in terms of when they're making a choice to use force based on what's being presented to them. And we noticed, and I'll highlight 3 decreases: 29% decrease in protection of self, a 61% decrease in protection of the public, and a 6% decrease in protection of another officer. Did you want to comment here?
I was just going to say, and again, keeping these in the context of the overall drops, we can see these perhaps as key drivers of those drops. And again, in my eyes, quite positive outcome.
The thing that's important that we'd like to note is this is giving us some evidence that our adoption of a human rights focused approach and that shift from traditional to guardian is taking place. And we want to keep a track on this. We're not going to put too much on this because it could shift year to year. And we're going to keep this as something to monitor and continue with. Can I get the next slide? So we've had some positive success. And despite that positive success, regrettably, we have not changed the overall overrepresentation of the Black community in use of force reporting. And I'll turn it over to Kwasi as to what we are doing in regard to that.
Thank you, Dirk. So, key to the overall work with respect to human rights is, of course, trying to achieve equitable outcomes. You can see here, and documented in the report, are the racial differences in overall use of force, and then with respect to certain different outcomes. And when we look at the data for this year, unfortunately, we're seeing, fortunately, we're seeing a fairly substantial increase when we go year over year from 2020 through to 2022 in overall use of force. But we continue to see the disparity largely unchanged, or in fact, with the reduced numbers slightly, just ever so slightly lower in 2022 than we did in 2020 for Black individuals. And so a few kind of important pieces to note here. In terms of the work that we were doing this year, key efforts were made. Of course, the way in which the report is structured makes it quite difficult to identify individuals rather than reports and incidents. And so we've been doing our best to try and identify individuals. And so I want to just kind of lay that context. But we've seen this overall reduction and a fairly significant reduction in overall use of force, but we have not seen the same reduction experienced or to the same extent for the Black community. Similarly, when we look at some of the outcomes, and part of the work, and again, thank you, Alex, for the time spent with the team, is looking at disparities in outcomes and looking at de-escalation, for example, looking at injuries. We see South Asian people are more likely than their representation in the use of force data and the general population to suffer from injuries. So in essence, again, the overall picture here is a positive one in terms of the use of force going down, but we continue, and I continue to be troubled by the persisting disparities, particularly related to the Black population, having experienced a 4% decrease in use of force over this time, compared with the larger amount for other groups. And this, again, really reinforces the need to further understand and to contextualize these disparities. And as noted, with respect to the broader race and identity-based data strategy, getting a better understanding of the internal factors, and this is to come, as well as the external, those contextual factors, is of utmost importance here. It has been a challenge this year in order to do that, and that's why, looking forward, I'm hopeful that with the resources that have and will continue to be allocated, we're going to get a better understanding of those.
Thank you. Can we get the next slide, please? So last year, we were asked by the board to actually really dive into what the mental health intersection of use of force was, and we've taken that into account. So in 2022, we had 6,654 calls for people in crisis. Of that 6,654 calls, we had 106 incidents that resulted in a use of force interaction, or 1.59%. Of that 106, there was a total of 136 total number of injuries for people involved in use of force, which is a 45% decrease when compared to 2020. Of that, 28 people who were in crisis experienced minor injuries, or 0.042%, We also had a 16% decrease in the number of officers involved. That number went down from 463 officers at the beginning of the project to 390 in 2022. And our data has shown us in a multitude of interactions that there's very little variance across racial groups when it comes to the number of officers involved and the types of force that are being used, with the exception of one incident, which was 11 applications of force to gain control of a Middle Eastern gentleman in a peaceful way to resolve an issue that was related to him being arrested for an offense and becoming combative and injuring an officer. Several officers were required, and it required several applications of force to resolve safely, and the gentleman was not injured there. Did you want to comment on the intersection of mental health and race at all? No? Okay. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So, as per the Ikamba inquest, we were specifically looking at how we could establish de-escalation and embed it permanently into our use of force model, but also take it outside of that and have de-escalation in our entire service delivery model. From the point of contact, when you come into contact with an individual, what actions and what behaviors are our officers presenting with that can mitigate use of force from even beginning or an escalation of any sort of negative activity. And we are up 8% in all de-escalation attempts from 88% last year to 96%. We are also up, when we look at it by race, when compared to last year, we've had a 7.7% increase for the Black community to 96.9%, a 5.2% increase to 95.7% for the white community, a 2.1% increase for the East South Asian community to 85.7%, and a 13.6% increase to 97.2% for the South Asian community, and Indigenous has not changed, primarily due to the small numbers that we have. And we also looked at our strip searches. And as I had mentioned earlier in this presentation, we had 25,700 custody events, of which only 15 people were strip searched. All of those strip searches were done as per our stringent guidelines in Peel. Only a staff sergeant or above can authorize a strip search, and a strip search can only be conducted if there's tangible evidence that the person might be possessing a weapon, or if there's a presence of drugs. And all of those strip searches were on adults, both male and female, as per the legislative requirements. Can I get the next slide, please? So we heard earlier from Mrs. DiBiase about the intersection of social factors that contribute to disparity and crime and the overrepresentation, particularly around young Black men in incarceration. We've been looking at a way that we could begin a community safety and well-being model and approach to this, and through our discussions, and I'll turn it over to the professor shortly, and with collaboration with Iraq, we have a model that we are going to be launching in the fall of this year. It'll look at the intersection of healthcare, education, child welfare, and courts, and what can be done by bringing all of those individual sectors to the table to examine what could be causing this external driver that is contributing to some of the disparities that we're seeing. It'll be 4 stages. We'll start with consultations and engagement in the community. We'll move over to strategy and development based on individual stakeholders from the community. And then we'll move into operationalizing the plan and then measurements and outcomes. And we don't know how many years something like this might take because it's never been done. And I'll let Akwasi comment on this approach.
Thank you, Dirk. So I think part of what is important here for me is we've acknowledged we need to better understand the internal drivers of the disparities. And I think many of you have heard Dirk say before that Peel didn't wait to be required to release race-based data before trying to move forward with respect to initiatives that might start to address some of those internal factors. And while the internal focus work continues, it is, of course, important to look at and to examine the external factors. The very fact that there was an individual here presenting or making a deputation to the board this morning seeking collaboration and partnership, I think demonstrates the desire, at least on certain segments of the community, to work in a comprehensive manner and a collaborative manner to address related issues. Now, you heard from her, and you've heard from me already, and they're outlined very clearly on the slide here what some of those drivers are. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that there is great interplay between these factors, that policing and criminal justice matters influence healthcare, education, child welfare, and vice versa. And so this, again, collaborative approach in consultation with the community that is comprehensive in the way that this is something that is very unique. It is totally unique within the policing world to be engaged not only with under an agreement with a human rights commission in the way that Peel is, but to be kind of moving forward externally with respect to this work. And so, as Dirk has said, how long something like this might take is unknown at this point because of its novelty, but its importance cannot be understated.
And thank you. And just in relation to us, we will connect with Ms. DiBiase. We're having robust conversations with the Anti-Racism Directorate to see if we can obtain funding to do exactly what she was saying. And she would be a valued partner and stakeholder in the community on this. And could I get to the next slide, please, Dabney? Thank you. So in this year's report, we included the last principle, which is the multi-year action plan. We highlighted over 17 individual actions that we have undertaken to do in the next calendar year. And 5 of them I wanted to just highlight for you. We are going to continue with expanding our race and identity-based data strategy to include a community advisory panel that can keep us kept abreast of the climate of the community outside of the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee. We are going to be phasing in, as of January 1st, a data collection strategy with the input of our 3 academics on arrest, charge, and detention. And then we are also going to begin the logistical and foundational work to start data collection so that we can get to all stops as well as traffic stops. Our mandatory human rights focused training will continue. We deliver approximately 10,000 hours a year. At the time that this report was drafted, we were sitting at 25,000. As I had mentioned, we'll be finishing off procedural justice as of November to the end of the year, and then we'll be starting with lived experience and a whole other set of curriculums into the new year. And again, this is something that our officers have adopted and accepted and is having large impact for us. And we're going to continue with our hiring and promotion to reflect the diversity of the community that has come up. As illustrated earlier, our goal is to try to get to 70% to reflect the diversity that we have in our region. We're sitting currently at 57% at the point that this was provided, and that is with the 4 designated groups that was highlighted in the last presentation. And with the last slide, did you want to comment at all? Could we go back to that? I don't know if you wanted to comment, sorry.
Yeah, I just simply want to say again, as we continue to work to better understand the outcomes that are observed and importantly, the disparities that are observed, the necessity of data is key here. And I've said this multiple times before, but the expansion of the data that can be used for analysis and recognizing that, the introduction of the regulation around carding, for example, was a positive one in terms of what that means for policing with the community, but it has also curtailed, to a certain extent, the ability to understand later policing outcomes because we lack a fulsome understanding of exactly who it is that the police are coming into contact with because data is now collected at a later stage, often when enforcement actions are taken, which does not include everyone who comes into the realm of contact with the police. So I just want to, continue to drive home the importance of that data in helping us understand and then subsequently address the disparities we're seeing.
Thank you. And as we move to the question phase, I just wanted to thank publicly the exceptional work done by the men and women of the organization at every level. It's our frontline folks, as you see, that are adopting the training, that are moving and attending. It's our staff sergeants that are amplifying the message from the chief and the message from the organization. And it's our senior leadership that actually is making sure that there's accountability put in place to make these changes necessary. And our association, right, who we keep abreast, who's here today, Mr. Trevor Arnold. We couldn't have done this without all of that. And of course, the leadership of the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee. It's been collaborative and we still have a lot of work to do. We're just getting started. And I'll pause there to see if there's any questions.
Thank you. So I have Ahmed Atia.
First of all, thank you. This is a priority for the board. It's a priority for the service. And there's a lot of time and minds being invested into this. I want to first say that it's very important to me in the way that you have structured this report this year. It not only provides, I think, the intended spirit of the provincial legislation on race-based data, which is transparency, but it sets the data and what you kind of talked about in the context of a larger project of the service, but more importantly, as a progress report, which I have interpreted myself as accountability. We've defined this report to ensure there's accountability towards better outcomes. And I think that's very important to continuing to build trust with the communities that are most impacted by use of force. On face value, I think it's very, it's good, it's important to see that use of force is reduced over the last year. But I think more importantly, in my mind, the interpretation of that is that our members are adopting the understanding, the change, the message from the top, and the lessons in the training, and are changing the ways they police. And I think that is the biggest takeaway for me when it comes to the numbers. Of course, we still have racial disparity, and I think that will remain for years to come, potentially. But we are learning from it, and we are acknowledging it, and that's the important takeaway today for me on that. My questions, I have a few questions. When we look at use of force, I see higher percentages when it comes to domestic disturbances and persons in crisis, 14 and 12%. And my question is, what measures can we take in those two categories, particularly in the way that we respond to those calls? What lessons can we take to bring those numbers down?
Excellent question, Mr. Atia. And through you, Chair, there's several things that we're looking at specifically around mental health. And as we move into creating strategies like the autism strategy, where we're dealing with people with certain developmental disabilities, we're also looking at strategies for dealing with people that are in crisis in the multitude of ways they can be in crisis, right? Whether it's schizophrenia, whether they're presenting with certain brain injuries or et cetera. And we have to be incorporating it into daily scenarios, training, and education. So we are experimenting with creating a mental health scenario-based sort of training that'll give them hands-on experience outside of the classroom and let them practice that de-escalation that we've spoken about repeatedly. This is fairly novel in terms of basing this, and it's only now going to be included in the use of force continuum as of January 1st, 2024, de-escalation. So we're only 2 years in and we've had some progress. So we know it's going to take time as a new skill to do. So that is one thing specifically that has been shown and validated to reduce use of force outcomes in relation to that. Domestic violence is one of the most heated and charged things that our frontline officers go into. And again, because it's frontline officers who tend to deal with the domestic situations, community education is always ongoing through Deputy Milinovich's area in relation to IPV, but we're also relying on de-escalation because regardless of what the situation is, the better our officers are at coming into situations where they can resolve it with that and become more conversant, we'll have a positive outcome.
Thank you. Building on that response, the uniform frontline officers, your slide highlighted the majority of use of force comes from them, and I want to be very careful so that is not misinterpreted in any way by the public. And so can you kind of touched on it now, but can you just further clarify why we see higher numbers with the frontline, and what do we need to do as well? Like what do we, I know we're training, but you know, is there more to it that we need to bring that down?
Certainly. Actually, maybe I could reframe that a little bit, because you have to look at it in the context of, as I said, they are the first responders. So this is when everything is heated and out of control. Investing in their skill set to resolve those situations appropriately is evidenced by that 1,000 drop I spoke about, that 48% drop. We invest heavily in giving them the capabilities to reduce that. So we're seeing massive reductions in how they're managing those situations. But we can't get away from the fact that, as I said, 96% leaves 4% of non-discretionary time where they show up. They're dealing with people in progress committing crimes and violent acts. So what is very promising is to see that we have almost a 50% drop, which means they are using de-escalation and resolving it as peacefully as possible without use of force. We're going to continue to invest in that. And one of the things that we've looked at through the Training Bureau is a actual large simulator, as I spoke about, where we give them the repetitions to do as much de-escalation training as possible. Coupled with that psychological training, they're coming in and they're making better decisions. And this is why the reasons force is being used has dropped significantly. 46%, 29%, and 61% are all those discretionary choices on how they're perceiving what's in front of them. That's telling us that they're adopting and slowing down and looking and coming in with that guardian mindset to de-escalate the situation. Though they have a lawful authority to use force, they're making better decisions from the get-go and from the interim. So we want to keep investing in that, and what we expect to see if this trending continues is we should see continual drops, and by giving them that advanced training.
Thank you. And I think it's very important that you're putting these percentages next to each other, right? Like the context is very important. We're seeing a reduction in their de-escalation techniques, even though we see the majority through use of force. But I mean, at the end of the day, I get it. You know, our frontline officers don't know what they're walking into. They have the most unpredictable experiences. So I think that gives me understanding. The de-escalation is a very positive message of this report. And I've witnessed the training, and I'm very happy we're seeing outcomes. I have a question. How do we actually track incidents that are using de-escalation? Are we literally taking every case where use of force is, looking at the notes, looking at maybe possible video to see how they dealt with it, and then determining whether it met our de-escalation training requirements? Like, is it?
Actually, the actual use of force forum from the ministry actually has a section that has alternative response and de-escalation, and whatever the officers have done, this is how we get the types of force reported. And Peel has been recognized by the Solgen's office as being the most thorough in the reporting, but all of that comes from the larger strategy than when we put it in place in 2020, which was we had to take time to build up the skill set to report accurately so that we could properly measure. And that leads me to another point that's critical and why our membership is doing such exceptional work. They're the hinge and the linchpin in the entire thing. Race-based data has failed in many U.S. departments. As recently as this week, Kwasi and I were speaking about an internal investigation in San Francisco where officers are fudging the race of individuals. Our officers aren't doing that. They understand what their role is in the human rights focused approach that we're looking to implement. They see how important and critical this work is, and they're invested in improving outcomes. And I say that because they're, through our Anti-Racism Act training and our ongoing training, we actually have, when they come through, sessions on filling out this data properly, because the data is of no use if it's not appropriately filled out for the analysis that needs to be conducted. So year over year, we'll see better improvements in that regard.
Okay. And through the chair, I have just two more questions. Do we actually, I know we've talked about this before, but are we looking at incidents that have use of force to determine whether an officer could have de-escalated in that scenario in order to, one, better train that person or feed that back into our, our training?
We are constantly reviewing that, and we also have a review mechanism that when use of force is happening, where a body-worn camera is present, a supervisor is required to actually analyze that footage to ensure that they're applying it appropriately. And we also have our training folks under Deputy DePat in IRTP do review of that for training purposes to see what techniques are working and what techniques you need to be worked at and improved on still further.
Very good. And how are findings of this report being communicated out to the community?
We haven't done that yet.
Okay.
Our hope is that we will be able to provide that in furtherance of the Human Rights Report annually, because we want to be as transparent as possible and show that we are making strides in that regard.
Right, but in the coming weeks, is there a plan to educate community on the outcomes of this report?
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. Yeah, we're going to be doing, there's going to be you want to take that, Deputy?
Sure, and just to top up, sir, just very quickly on your question about, two specific areas where there's a higher percentage of use of force applications because of violent crime, IPV, and those with mental health crisis. What is very important to note is that concurrently to this work, race-based data collection work, there is a risk and identity-based data collection project that is ongoing at Peel Regional Police to identify the underlying risk areas like mental health, like addictions, that may lead to more violent calls for service, and for us to then address them. And I think that's a very important point, and that launches in the next month. In terms of our communication plan, there is a thorough external communications release that is going out later today or early next week, and there has been communications internally as well. This is posted on our website as well, and we have also received some suggestions from our Anti-Racism Advisory Committee on the information going out to the community through them as well. Thank you.
And the last thing, just to top up on what the deputy said, is in our meeting with our Anti-Racism Advisory Committee on Wednesday, we actually strategized how we were going to do community engagement around the report, and we'll be starting that in the fall. And we'll have open sessions where people can come and discuss this, and then focus sessions specifically if there's elements of the report and the project on how what they would like to see in future iterations.
All right, all done. Perfect. Thank you. Now moving to Mr. Lancarby.
First of all, thank you for the report as presented. It is extremely comprehensive, and it provides context for releasing the use of force data, which in previous years, as you know, data can be interpreted. This here provides some more context as the information comes out to our community about the use of force. I am certainly encouraged by the overall drop in numbers of use of force. That has certainly been part of the effort of PRP to reduce those numbers. But it would be remiss if I didn't underscore a measure of concern that the disparity, especially within the Black community, persists. And you have already spoken to that, so I won't belabor the point. The question I have speaks to the response to that, which we're kind of going into uncharted territory as we talked about the strategy to understand why the disparities persist. And of course, yes, being in uncharted territory, it's new ground. No police service has ever done this. So again, I commend PRP on taking the initiative to lean forward to understand the disparities a little bit more. I wonder if you might speak a little bit, though, although it's new area, if there is some kind of timeline that could be given around what that study will look like, and when can our community expect some feedback on what the findings might be as we try to understand that a little bit better.
So sure, I'll start, and then I'll let the professor jump in. We're going to start with the first step, which is going to be consultations in the fall. It's going to be a collaborative with the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee, but it's also going to require experts from all of the different fields to come together. So we're going to move on this immediately in October. We have dates and times planned, and we've already spoken with the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee to start with stage one. We don't know how long stage one itself will take because we don't know what other sectors are going to say they need to be supported. But we are prepared to do this synergistically because we know as we roll out the further iterations of race-based data, we're going to find disparities in arrests, charge, detention, and it's going to help contextualize what we need to do year over year as we move forward. With regard to the academics, I have one opinion about how fast they move. I think the professor has a different opinion, so I'll let him comment on that.
No, opinion's the same. They call sociologists slow journalists. So to points on either side again, the external aspect is not completely in the realm of control, of course. Like internally, even just thinking about the amount of work that was done this year in order to essentially verify and clean and try and triangulate just the use of force data that was presented was an immense amount of work. I think one of the key areas is going to be getting that broader stop, so the pedestrian and traffic stop data. We've seen other services that have released data, again, around enforcement actions in connection to use of force, which could perhaps be done in a shorter time frame than a more comprehensive study would be. But it's not telling the whole story, and it might be telling a rather incorrect story. And so it's a matter of, and we're not there yet because we'll be meeting in just a couple of weeks to fully examine what will be needed for the more comprehensive collection of data and what will be needed, and this is on Dirk's side, not mine, but in terms of the data management systems, et cetera, and then what could be done for analysis. So I certainly haven't answered your question, but I will say that, like, internally, I think there's more kind of control over timelines than there is on the external side.
And so we're going to be doing several of these things synergistically. We're not waiting for one step to finish, because we also have the data collection expansion as well as the disparity reduction planning. It'll be happening simultaneously. We won't wait for one to start the other. So the short answer to your question is we're starting in October.
Great. Thank you for that.
Just through the chair, just to build off the question and timelines, like I would imagine next year's report is going to be kind of like the next lens to this is that piece, right? So the board.
That's right. So, like you had mentioned, we laid out the report that year over year we can follow the principles and then add on and say what we've completed and what we'll do as part of the multi-year planning.
Good. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions, comments? Perfect. Thank you to both of you. And as my colleague Leonard said, very thorough, very comprehensive. And thank you for sharing the background and the build up to how the results were attained. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I have someone to receive Al Boughton, and second, Len Carby, thank you so much. Moving to item 6.1, so Drager Alcotest 7000 approved screening device ASD direct negotiation request, report dated September 18th by Chief Duriapa, providing the board with the request for direction negotiation with Drager TELUS for the provision of 280 additional Drager Alcotest 7000 approved screening devices. To the board, we have the recommendation in front of us. Do you have any questions or comment? If not, we can move to the next step. No? Okay, can I have someone to receive? Perfect. Al Boughton, Len Carby to second. Moving, and now we will be adjourning the public portion of the meeting today. Thank you to everyone who came out. We're not going to take a break because I know we're going to go right into in-camera. Yeah. We're just going to wait a quick minute to clear the room. Thank you to everyone.